here often. I imagine anyone who does is probably an alcoholic.
There's gotta be something out there in the universe, right? I always thought so. Seems like a good bet. But how much of that gut feeling is just cope for feeling alone? Mass Effect is one of the biggest names in games. You've heard of it, and if you haven't, hey look, big video. Before Overwatch sent 3D animation into a generational evolutionary spiral, there was Mass Effect. For the exact same reason. It might be hard to understand now, looking at the wibbly-wobbly goober mechanics and third-person cover shooter gameplay in very large quotation marks, but Mass Effect was a once-in-a-generation series. How many trilogies do you know that came out of the 7th console generation and stayed there? Right. Now ask yourself, how many let you build up a character, meet compelling digital people, make important choices, and carry on your story game over game? That's what I thought. Nothing else really felt like Mass Effect. It was infectious. It sucked people in and got them invested. It felt like the future. And depressingly enough, it was. But it's been a long time since I first played the series, and I think I want to head back. 12 or so years have passed since I ran that gauntlet. I can't even count how many people I've been since then. We've all changed. Bioware changed. Bioware changed a lot. Those first wobbly steps into the future Milky Way were actually well-tread ground. BioWare's oldest games were restrictive and stilted, very much centered in the history of Dungeons & Dragons, but those restraints started to fray throughout the early aughts. Games like KOTOR, Mass Effect's direct ancestor, were saddled with the D20 combat of its own tabletop RPG parentage, but KOTOR, and eventually Jade Empire, were moving on. Clear strides into the home console space. CRPG, as far as any 360 kid might have known, could just as well have meant console RPG instead of computer RPG. BioWare was interested in pushing past the PC market and struck their claim in the suburbs with increasingly consoleized CRPGs. Some people look at the eventual fall of Mass Effect as the result of Andromeda, its doomed post-trilogy entry, and maybe that's true. Some look back as early as Mass Effect 2, the AAA-ification of the franchise. A life tip from me to you: whenever your avocados spoil, it's not because you forgot about them yesterday. Oh no. There were signs. The sting of Mass Effect's evolution, let's call it, is understandable. These design priorities were already well established when Jade Empire decided to ditch the D20 combat framework and hit the OG Xbox, but Mass Effect cast a spell on players. The way it appealed to every familiar piece of sci-fi, every B flick, every generico cop production, made it so profoundly easy to sit back and let the experience wash over you. In spite of everything, and very much like Borderlands before it, Mass Effect felt punk. It was a new sci-fi Xbox IP that wasn't just Star Wars again. Even if it actually was, it was a 7th-gen BioWare original for home consoles. Mass Effect had heavy choices. Mass Effect had sex. The game was instantly catapulted into gamer punk cult status when Fox News, hot off Jack Thompson's ill-fated push against video game violence and all the buzz around Grand Theft Auto's hot coffee scene, ran segments decrying Mass Effect's alleged full-frontal nudity, despite not one single penis being visible in the entire Mass Effect universe.
You can actually play through this game without the sexual situation ever happening.
Right, and the young boys
game.
are going to be choosing not to have sex. That'll be what they'll choose. I mean,
No,
let's be
because
realistic
it's not
here.
a simple choice, but
Singapore briefly banned the game. A neoconservative blogger said, and I quote, "Mass Effect can be customized to sodomize whatever, whomever, however the player wishes. With its over-the-net capabilities, virtual orgasmic rape is just the push of a button away." Can you lie to that degree without getting sued? McCullough was so off base, the very same Jack Thompson called the controversy ridiculous. And though I'm admittedly paraphrasing here, this McCullough guy isn't even a real gamer like me, Jack Thompson. And by the way, I romance Tali every time. It was, to the up-and-comer generation, people like the younger me who never played Dungeons & Dragons and didn't really care about Star Wars because it was something my parents liked, new era, punk, gamer. So, with significantly older eyes, we look back at Mass Effect. Looks like this space has been abandoned for some time. Keep your head down. Who knows what you'll find out. Yeah, shut the up, comm chatter dipshits. I'm picking up some strange readings. Oh my god. I think I've uncovered an alien species.
KBash, this is like the 4th time you've shown your cat in a video.
I fail to see the problem here. Someone, somewhere, who's never played Mass Effect before is currently asking, what is Mass Effect about? What is this serene intro screen? Mass Effect is a game where you shoot bugs. Robots, too. It gets a little bit more complicated than that. Now, I ain't no day one Mass Effect fan. I may have been a 360 owner, but in those days, I was more interested in pub-stomping bad Keyleth players in Soul Calibur 4 and making tasteful posts on my Halo 3 profile. A friend recommended the trilogy, and after years of delving exclusively into multiplayer games and realizing I wasn't going pro anytime soon, I jumped back into long single-player titles. Mass Effect was a gamble for me. I wasn't really into this kind of game, and I also wasn't into sci-fi, conceptually. That's a me thing. I was always a seriously picky person when it came to unfamiliar media, and mostly kept to stock fantasy fare. But since a friend told me it was, quote, really good, and there were character building opportunities, and I like Dragon Age Origins okay, I thought, why not? Let's give it a shot.
Shepard! I am a biotic god. No, don't touch me!
My name is Conrad.
Great, now I have to go and tell all my Games as Art friends that I like an EA property now. Thanks, Bioware. It's not that I think Mass Effect is secretly brilliant or whatever. It's one of the most popular IPs ever produced. They already got the bag. We don't need to act like oppressed minorities when our thing gets criticized. But if I'm good at one thing, it's waffling about both sides of any coin until nobody is happy. Mass Effect's premise is pretty simple. In the distant future, humankind has entered an era of space travel and discovered a host of galactic neighbors who initially treat them with general disdain. After the wars, of course, but eventually treat them like evolved monkeys, which is basically true. And since all of human history has taught us that if we just work hard enough and do good for our betters, they'll eventually respect us. We're on a quest to do just that. Players are thrust into the well-worn boots of Commander Shepard, a human of no canonical sex, appearance, or specific combat ability, except that they're really good at it. You're malleable from the very first scene. For all intents and purposes, Shepard is you. I'm sorry. That said, background options are limited. You're almost certainly parentless, excepting one background option. You've almost certainly had a rough life, again, excepting one background option. And even there, you're whisked around as a military brat and enlist at 18. And you've been a soldier all your adult life, either a war hero, a butcher, or a survivor. These background options influence dialogue, side quests, and your extremely trendy morality bar in very minor ways, but it's an important roleplay factor as well. You can start playing Mass Effect before ever entering combat. Shepard is a pretty boldly storied individual for someone passed off to the player as a level 1 blank slate, and that can be a little daunting, but it's important to the series. You don't get to tell a serious cross-galaxy war story where the plucky upstart fumbles their way through every encounter, okay? Shepard has to be somebody. Mass Effect lets you call yourself a hero, frame 1, a murderer or bigot, frame 1. And lets you decide whether to live up to your pre-established reputation or prove it wrong. Oh shoot, I've got too many Paragon points. Just trying to go for a neutral run. Can you just like stay still? In space, you may be a nobody, but you're about to become a lot more somebody. Your character class is also player determined, 3 core classes and 3 hybrids reflecting the different kinds of killing foci this world allows for. Combat's 3 cores are, unhelpfully, combat, tech, and biotic, represented by the adept, the engineer, and the soldier. Jumble those core traits and you get the infiltrator, the sentinel, and the vanguard. If you're using this video to get into Mass Effect, let me save you some time. Space Wizard. Adrenaline rush is overpowered. Nobody plays this one. Cloaking device. These guys do something, apparently. Teleport tackle. In my previous runs, I only ever dabbled in the infiltrator and the biotic classes, so this time, I felt like living up to Shepard's illustrious military background, an ex-criminal turned military operative, and the sole survivor of incredible hardship. I chose the soldier, the white bread of Mass Effect, and walked boldly into my new life. Dude, We've been here 5 minutes. You're first chosen to assist a Council Spectre, effectively a diplomatically immune, hand-picked government agent on his mission to extract information from a recently uncovered alien relic. Humans are effectively second-class Galaxians, like several other in-game alien races. The dominant species have kept humanity at arm's length, but after endless advocating and military assistance, are willing to allow humanity the chance to be momentarily useful. This is the framing device the player can choose to ignore, like so many teenagers did, or, like with Shepard's background, pay a little attention. It's worth noting that I'm on the Legendary Edition for the entire trilogy, a collection released in 2021 to mostly supportive reviews, but some pushback regarding various frame rate bugs, which can render shields worthless above a certain FPS threshold, and altered visual direction for the first game. Other fringe criticism exists, but visual differences become less apparent through the second and third games, where the intention became offering an HD version of a beloved series. Mass Effect 1 got special treatment because, frankly, it was a first-entry 7th-gen console game out of Bioware. So visual sludge. While the dynamics of a couple areas are inarguably altered as a player of both versions, it's hard to call the changes genuinely bad. Mass Effect is a dim game, only occasionally popping with color and much more frequently in later entries, so several of the changes to the first title's visuals only serve to visually elevate the hopeful nature of the game, an important piece of the first game's tone that frays over progressive entries and heightening stakes. I get that there's renewed interest in retaining the artistic vision of the creators, preserving the original visuals, but if that means having to look at 7th-gen texture sludge all day, I do not want to do that. Combat is also a little different in the Legendary Edition. While the original was fairly slow-moving and at least postured towards using cover frequently, the Legendary Edition's more cohesive action framework gels better with the rest of the trilogy. You can have a more tactical or more aggressive experience in either version, just scale the difficulty if you feel like your time's being strained. It's an adventure first, though combat is important to the narrative. Shepard is a soldier, his best friends are his squad mates. Combat has worth, so we'll be playing on the default difficulty throughout. Shepard finds the colony overrun with sentient machines. The Geth manages to rescue a soldier, Ashley, who squads up right there, and everyone gets traumatized at once. Watching a human get impaled, drained, and turn into a zombie-like husk. Damn, that's totally gross and weird. But not as gross and weird as intergalactic politics, am I right? Up high! Another Spectre, Saren, shoots the guy you've been assisting in the head. Always knew you were a real galactic shit-ass, Saren.
Oh yeah? Well, Baba Booey.
I like the film grain option hidden in the menus here. I mentioned these games were going for familiar, especially in recreating old sci-fi tradition, and it's not even subtle. I mean, maybe the effect is subdued because YouTube filters out noise and film grain, but just imagine it's there. Perfect. You find the corpse, Saren, and even watch a squid take flight. The sequence culminates with Shepard finding the activated alien device.
Do you have contact with autograph?
And blowing up. It's a strong intro to counterbalance the meandering Shepard crafting and general table setting that follows. Robots, horror, squids, crime, the hallmarks of like 4 different kinds of fiction rolled into a big fat blunt you hit all at once. Oh yeah, brother. I'm feeling that grass effect. Now at this point, you know Saren's a murderer, but you don't have video evidence, and that sucks because you're about to walk into a galactic council meeting with the resident human representative to formally charge the guy and have his Spectre status revoked. But since you're a big stupid primate, the council thinks long and hard about this important matter and tells you to f*** off because, you know, firstly, you're human. Ooga booga, my dude. And second, because without definitive proof, you're just making unsubstantiated accusations. And it's the future. Can't we just deepfake him jerking off in public? This beat is of narrative establishing importance. Mass Effect wants to tell the player, to their face, that bureaucracy, red tape, de rules are more important than whatever you thought you saw, but can't prove. Because nobody in this futuristic setting was scanning for audio, got a visual of Buddy getting into the squid, etc., we'll be here all day if I get griping. And it's the core of the morality system here. Some people like to meme about the Paragon Renegade bar because it's kind of inconsistent inconsistent and maybe vague at a glance, but the intention is pretty clear. Act within the expectations of your position, i.e. a paragon of humanity, someone who understands humanity's place in the galaxy, is riding on your shoulders, or go against the systems holding you back, acknowledging that you can do whatever you want until someone's got the stones to tell you off and the gun to back it up. So, decent person versus sociopath. Got it. Shepard hits the streets looking for anyone, anything that could help improve. Saren's a no-good hombre.
Shepard, you've been gone 20 minutes. Mind explaining your entourage?
Mass Effect is nothing without its characters. Everyone clings to something about these games. The combat, the third game's multiplayer mode, but for most people, it's the characters. And that can seem silly to outsiders, but you gotta remember that Mass Effect did something no other game did. Provide robust digital personalities that carried over throughout 3 continuous games. They don't all return between entries, but you befriend these people. You watch some of them die. There's a level of investment only heightened by the sharp presentation, greater graphical fidelity, and continuity nobody else could offer.
I think Bioware characters tend to get less credit than they maybe deserve for their actual value in the medium. These aren't just people who dialogue dump on you for 10 episodes like a Persona game. These are people whose stories you have a hand in, right? There's a level of authorship afforded to the player, which is an expression of personhood so rare in the medium. It elevates these characters to a place most games can never compete with. We could do full character analyses all day, but Mass Effect keeps engagement optional. It wants you to holistically enjoy these characters, so I'm gonna give an overview instead. The first 2 party members are humans, Ashley and Kaidan. Makes sense you'd start with them. The game is narratively concerned with humanity's gradual inclusion in galactic politics, and your Alliance military. Ashley's from a military family, though not a particularly well-regarded one. Her poor father. Never did hit 10th prestige. Shepard, war hero or not, is a hero to Ashley. Her most standout characteristic is her seemingly stark blinding racism towards alien species, but the game's careful with the handling. Ashley's father was among the first humans to surrender to an alien force during the First Contact War, meaning she had to work twice as hard, maybe 3 times even, to earn respect in her own career, as both a woman in the military and the daughter of a known failure. The trouble is, her religious bent sat alongside her blunt turn of phrase,
"But, I'm concerned about the aliens, Vicarian and Rex. With all due respect, Commander, should they have full access to the ship?"
"They should be sleeping in kennels like the dogs that they are!" Initially makes her seem, at least to a much younger Canadian like I was on first pass, a joke, a scathing critique of Bush-era conservatism, the distrust in anything not from good old-fashioned America, but spun for the whole galaxy. In truth, she's the quintessential soldier in Mass Effect's universe. She's the soldier in your squad because she's worked just that hard, in the face of her own and her family's troubles, in a future fraught with gravity magic and skin-shredding tech, to stand on the front lines with the first human Spectre. Ashley, like as a person, kinda sucks. She's hard-headed and close-minded. She isn't for me. But it would be silly to look at a character portrayed this way as, ontologically evil, blacklist this media now! That's just an unhealthy way to engage with media, you know. Berserk isn't trash because there's a particular string of cruelty that would get you demonetized on YouTube. I refuse to be that flagrantly anti-art. She's not even particularly anti-alien past the first couple conversations. Yeah, she intros like that. Ugh, all the shifty Xenos on this ship. Are they here? But she explicitly condemns xenophobic groups both in Mass Effect 1 and the sequel when Shepard joins up with a human supremacist terrorist organization. I just think her wishy-washy handling is uncomfortable and makes other people uncomfortable. We could talk about Kaidan for about 5 minutes, but he mostly exists to say, hey, the biotics only got their gravity magic through a lot of pain and trauma, and coping with it is hard. And also the institutions we create in the name of progress cause a lot of harm before they start doing good sometimes. And yeah, pretty bog standard human reality right there. Some exfoliation products are notoriously bad for your skin, but it wasn't known until significantly later. Perhaps more thorough regulation is actually justice. I don't want to call Kaidan profoundly boring, but as a person, he's reserved, controlled, and never really breaks free of that at any point. And among a sea of shining stars, tends to fade into the background. It is so funny. He's the game's jack-of-all-trades sentinel character. Garrus is actually an optional recruit. He's a loose cannon satanic cop who doesn't play by the rules. Garrus gets progressively uncomfortable over the course of this series, and we'll touch on that when it's appropriate, but in this early title serves as a kind of vision for Shepard. Mass Effect 1 is very loud in its insistence that red tape means no justice, and Garrus is just the vigilante to take matters into his own hands, especially if the matters in question are criminal next. In that sense, he's a mirror to Shepard. He joins up because they share the same take on Saren, but while you have the enormity of humanity's place in the galaxy riding on your shoulders, Garrus is only on the downswing, leaving behind his career and even shaming his family. He's already on the renegade path, and he's got increasingly less to lose. You can see why people like him. He's weird to look at, but bizarrely human. Quick with a joke or lighthearted snark, and always up for whatever. He's also a little unique. You can influence his way of thinking over the course of the games, especially between 1 and 2, just by bouncing ideas off the guy, butting up against him. He's more malleable than the rest, and that matters for the series. I can't think of any other game at the time that not only allowed continuity across multiple entries, but specifically allowed some characters' actions to change between games based on mere conversation. Rex was always one of my favorites. He may be easy to despise for some subset of players. I've heard plenty of people kill him off at Vermeer, which is fascinating because his plight is incredibly sympathetic if you understand the weight. Then again, gamers don't empathize, they utilize, and Rex is a bit of a problem. Oh boy. He's older than you, more experienced than you, and he doesn't always defer to your command. I mean, mechanically, he does, but he'll still shoot this guy unprompted because bounties need collecting. Bro put his needs first and y'all shot him for it. Shake my damn head. Rex is a Krogan, a warlike species that became such a threat to galactic stability with their overwhelming forces and incredible strength, the Solarians concocted a means to render the species effectively infertile. Now, their people, their traditions, culture, etc. are in danger of extinction, and the Galactic Council is ultimately at the root. Once again, Mass Effect makes a point of saying that big government dangerous. Mass Effect actually manages to handle its political messaging pretty well, carefully avoiding leaning any particular way by presenting the realities underpinning those ideals. The Council is strict and outdated, but the Council is maybe necessary, ensuring a standard of well-being for most of the citizens under its jurisdiction. But just as well, the systems have grown complex and corrupt enough that even basic justice is compromised by an otherwise progressive cause. These are profoundly human problems without simple solutions. That said, the Krogan situation is ethnic cleansing, and while maybe, possibly, arguably, numerically understandable, the game's going to dodge the question. We don't see what the Krogan were like, or how bad things were, or what other options were on the table, and it's all getting chucked by 3. Instead, we get Rex, a cynical old bastard who will try to gun you down provided you fail to talk him down when your party heads off to destroy a facility that's producing a cure to the Krogan genophage. It's a reasonable conflict. It's not even kind of hard to wrap your head around, and he's willing to back down in this particular case because the villain is planning on enslaving his tank-bred Krogan army to his own nefarious ends. Rex isn't compelling because he's sympathetic necessarily, but because these disparate perspectives on the galaxy come into direct conflict with the player over the course of the games. He's not treated as crazy, he has a point, and you have your priorities. Conflict resolution, working through these struggles, makes for powerful role-playing. Tali is a fan favorite, a fellow second-class galactic citizen from the Quarian race, people who were effectively exiled from their own homeworld and turned starship nomads because the race of sentient machines they created, the Geth, grew overly intelligent and rebelled against their creators. She's investigating them when she gets access to an audio log proving Saren's guilt and is pivotal for getting his Spectre status revoked, thereby pitting him and the eventual proper antagonists directly against Shepard. The Geth are working with Saren because they're controlled by the Reapers, the quote, old machines residing outside charted space. Or rather, the Geth's neural network is corrupted by the Reapers, but the incredibly uncomfortable Geth question will come up more palpably later in the games. For now, it's swept a little under the rug here as Geth individuality isn't really on the table, so they're treated as mindless machines regardless of any potential for autonomous function. Tali's a great reminder of the importance of working in harmony. She's critical to the story, as we've mentioned, but also because of her people's way of life life being tied to spacecrafts. She has unique knowledge the Alliance military doesn't, and she can help in ways that aren't mechanically relevant. And yet she's also unable to truly gel with the ship. The silence with which it runs makes it hard for her to sleep because her people's own ships are noisy, and quiet means something isn't working. There's tension in that, the give and take between disparate groups, how she's almost kind of human, but always appears veiled, has features just alien enough to raise an eyebrow, the way she never truly fits in. Despite consistently romancing Liara throughout the series, I don't have much to say about her. Liara is a scientist, archaeologist, a nerd, if you will. While Borderlands propped up Tannis as having Asperger's, Liara is in the same ballpark, even if nobody says it outright. She doesn't get social cues, jokes. She obsesses over a dead alien race, and she wants on your ship explicitly to learn about all the stuff you saw in the Prothean beacon, and to help you regarding anything Prothean related. You might call it selfish, but we'll just call it focused. Hyper-focused, if you will. Fixated, perhaps.
Relax, Commander. Embrace eternity.
It's me, Conrad Burner!
That was incredible. What you have seen would have destroyed a lesser mind.
Liara's mother is directly in league with Saren, seen in the hilariously evil space opera cutaway scenes between major missions. Oh, Saren, isn't it a lovely day to be diabolical in a poorly lit room?
Indeed, it is a most monstrously gorgeous day, Benezia.
This shit sucks so bad, dog. She's important to the story for those few important reasons, and to help tie the Asari to the Normandy. The three council races are the Turians, the Asari, and the Solarians, each galactically relevant for different reasons. Shepard crewing up with these people makes him more trustworthy to the council. Yeah, he could be being manipulated by people with friends in high places, but he chooses, Paragon or Renegade, to take these squad mates on as people, not as paragons of their own races. It's what makes it so goddamn disingenuous to call the core of Mass Effect conservative or whatever. Some rancid, decrepit material is firmly woven into the game's fabric, but the core is pure, communal, trusting. The core cares about other people and their worth, their individual struggles. It's profoundly hopeful by design. It's why people like it, emotionally react to it. And the main conflict is more a fun, classic film-inspired romp through the galaxy than simple propaganda.
Hold it right there.
Because the game will hand you plausible deniability every time. If I have one bit of criticism for the party, it's guys, seriously. No Solarians, but we get Aiden. The world, the universe of Mass Effect is cold, desolate, occasionally colorful, but always tense. There's something about making a tech-strapped 7th-gen console space opera and presenting it as lonely, underpinned with militarism and hard-boiled grit. The colors are exactly what you'd expect, the environments don't have to be overly populated, and the allure to the unknown makes up for how dismal the world actually is. This is the type of world where, if you rifled through some alien's desk, expecting some kind of artifact or technology, you'd probably just find porn. While you're funneled into apparently settled cities, colonies, etc., you're barely given a real sense of the lives lived in these spaces, something the later games improve immensely as more money and greater fidelity become the driving force behind the franchise, making Mass Effect massive. The original game's occupied zones are dotted with NPCs, a handful of side quests, and frankly, more important matters at hand, so the average player takes their eyes off all the ugly brown brick and peers down the barrel of their gun. When I was younger, I just thought the thing looked kinda old and kinda Bioware. I hadn't played KOTOR and didn't recognize the absolute one-for-one swap, the genuine foundation laid by that older title and other RPGs Bioware made after. Mass Effect 1, for all its innovations, is probably so beloved by fans because it feels so quintessentially OG Bioware, before the glitz and the streamlining and cover shooter action gameplay. This little city might as well have been ripped out of KOTOR and slapped down here. They just dimmed the lights and glossed the walls. Learning about game dev, things start to click into place. Of course, a company that made such a killing on Knights of the Old Republic and lost the chance to handle the highly successful sequel would want to capitalize on their own successes. And so, Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, uniquely Bioware edition. I guess it's not exactly like KOTOR, though. You're a person of incredible power, traversing planets whose order you choose, collecting a diverse cast of aliens, dealing with interplanetary politics, and adventuring through zones occasionally interrupted by long combat sequences. Like I said, Mass Effect is about crime. But the game did something KOTOR simply didn't have the specs to support: planetary exploration. You hop all over the Milky Way, and when you don't feel like progressing the main campaign, there's a whole pile of self-directed, vaguely designed stuff you can go and see. Yeah, most of it is boring, liberally repurposes assets, and doesn't meaningfully shake up the play. You figure most of this stuff would get cut, regardless of how aligned some of this lonely space western material is. But Mass Effect sold players the dream that so many later games would try and fail to sell on much more powerful hardware: genuine space travel. And you get to be the guy you made, uncovering the unknown, taking a shit in every known planet. Mass Effect could have sucked balls and it would have pulled sales just for that. It's the final frontier for a reason, okay? Space is scary. I saw that Magic School Bus episode as a kid and watched Arnold freeze his whole head like a goddamn maniac, and that picture stuck. In case it wasn't already, now it's stuck in you too. Welcome to my nightmares. They're also used for personal character missions. Rex tracked his dad's suit of armor down. We gotta get it back. Drake Shepard. Hey, no problem. Sure, we ditched that one planet in the middle of a Arachni infestation for this, but hey, you're worth it. Who put this puzzle in here? Satan? Satan, was that you? The combat zones don't do much to inspire confidence in this vision of the Milky Way. They're barren, war-torn, and when they are explicitly settled, or were before whatever tragedy struck, they seem impossibly vertical, highlighting the smallness of the party in a way I've never really experienced before. The other games tap into this too, but this skyline always stuck with me for how truly, incomparably irrelevant Shepard and co. feel. Go change the galaxy. Yeah, okay. Okay, dipshit, let me hop right on that. You impact maybe a handful of lives, a handful of times over the course of the game. And really, reasonably, that's all anybody can do. The universe is far past the scale a single mind can ever accurately imagine, and the only way to not get overwhelmed is to stick to the ground and keep moving forward. Most of Mass Effect's actual play has nothing to do with those explorable planets, by the way, and instead looks exactly like the average KOTOR mission. You waltz into a planet, get into an altercation of some kind, maybe talk to settlers or some other force for intel and side quests, and run the Bioware hallway gauntlet like KOTOR before it, like Dragon Age Origins. It's just what you'd expect from the studio. The difference lies in the approaching action framework and the context. This game is so incredibly funny. Okay, gun to your head, what would you do if Commander Shepard pulled his gun on you? I'd beg him to pull the trigger. Shepard is kind of like the Terminator or the Gestapo. Bad news. He's got incredible skill, big guns, and council protection. He can do whatever he wants. So yeah, you can pull a gun on the local security checkpoint. You can start blasting at the drop of a hat. You're not supposed to. You're definitely encouraged to act in humanity's best interests, but sometimes you just gotta put a goon in their place. While the implications are horrifying, Shepard isn't going to be court-martialed or meaningfully justiced at any point. It's a very enjoyable way to craft a gameplay experience. You will walk into scenarios you lack the Paragon points to defuse, and be reduced to violence regardless, whether or not your finger pulls first. But the game's here to pat your back. It's okay, bud. This sucks hella, but you pulled through. You'll get him next time. It's honest about the reality that, yeah, most people in positions of power aren't equipped or trained adequately in serving the people they're meant to protect. And that's better than pretending any of this is right and good. You will be the bad guy, but sometimes the bad guy gets the job done. And you're left with your own allies, your tribe's opinions, to sort you out. Dragon Age and other Bioware games were brilliant for calling out players over things they believed in, challenging assumptions, and forcing players to think and reconcile, genuinely hammer out where they stand. Mass Effect does this too, though maybe to a lesser degree. There's almost never a point where someone threatens to leave, at least until later games, like a couple of fringe cases, and usually when Shepard does something controversial, but it's also understood that you're the commander, you're pursuing galactic peace, and even if you make mistakes, nobody else is doing what you are. Mass Effect is an RPG published by Microsoft in the late aughts. You know that shit had a morality system. It's not a question, it's a prerequisite. Players like choice. They like choosing between Hot Pockets and Pizza Pops. They like choosing between taking a fiber supplement and not taking a fiber supplement. They like choosing between life and death. So Paragon and Renegade, with a third mechanically disincentivized, freewheeling in-between for the indecisive, kind of a letdown all things considered. Becoming a Paragon is choosing to uphold a political reality for fictional people, physically advocating for your species on the galactic stage, like becoming a teacher in the real world. Some people, thrust into positions of power, are simply held to a higher standard, the gamer's anathema. What do you mean exactly that it's, quote, bad to shoot a guy in the face? You can't tell me what to do, game devs. You can't tell me what to do, my wife. It's my constitutional right to scream the N-word. Hence Renegade, also known as Adult Oppositional Defiance Disorder, or more embarrassingly, Garrosh Hellscream did nothing wrong. Renegade is weaker in this first game conceptually. There's a lot riding on Shepard, and you're made to feel the weight. You're the guy teaming up with aliens. You're the guy Anderson wants to live through vicariously. You're the guy who has to listen to Ashley screed about those damn dirty aliens, always hopping the border. But I don't want people to think Renegade is an invalid or even wrong choice here. Mass Effect, while extolling the virtues of Kumbaya, also makes a point of highlighting the inadequacy of deeply entrenched institutions and quite literally walls you off from investigating an obvious galactic traitor criminal bastard with everything but physical red tape. You want to be a renegade. You want to get out there and break a few galactic laws with that sweet, sweet extrajudicial hammer. You want to break into some weird dude's office and shoot his goons dead. Yeah, keep the change, you filthy animal. Mass Effect lulls the passive player enjoying their little space journey with their little space music into a tempting trance of ignorant action. And nobody exists who can meaningfully litigate you. The finger-wagging and gun-waving opposition you face knows damn well someone's going home in a body bag, and buddy, they're gonna have to call it. It turns the player into an unwitting death machine, so smoothly propels the player through each story beat, they might not even notice they've done something terrible. When you're young, you think, the world must be full of people who got educated and groomed into positions of power and knowledge. Then you get old and find out the world's just full of big old babies bopping around, f***ing up, totally pathologically compromised and possibly propagandized. A lot of us just blow in from the hurricane before getting offered a chair or a desk. I don't blame myself for inadvertently tripping the alarm on Novaria and being mechanically forced to kill every NPC I come across. You can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs, and brother, I'm a hungry boy. All of that philosophical waffle aside, gameplay mostly takes place in hallways, or like walkways with light cover. Occasionally you get rock formations and pillars and things, but for the most part you're stuck in the contrivances known as Bioware combat rooms. You're not often required to use cover. Plenty of environments allow you to pop out and drift back at your leisure between unloading and reloading, and the play has a slow, pounding rhythm to it that makes it feel more impactful than it might otherwise. Its weight signifies importance. Enemies are dumb, and sometimes that's weaponized against you. Get the f*** out of here, bro! But that's fine. You're Commander Shepard. You're always one step ahead mentally, and generally only limited by cooldowns, reloads, and recovery frames. Getting up close isn't recommended for most classes, but Shepard can take a swing if someone's getting fresh. Just don't try it on every enemy type. See, I knew they were good at melee in the lore, and here I am, looking like a dang old fool. Your team is 3 members strong at any point. It's on you to level up, kit out, and squad up however you like. As a soldier, I took everyone along on missions except for Ashley. No need for direct overlap when there's 3 kinds of combat and utilities specific to those vectors. Tech has unlocking utility like a rogue in Dragon Age, and multiple different classes have a healing option, from biotic powers to simple first aid. It's a fairly threadbare system, never overly complex, but just tight enough that you can die in certain rooms if you aren't accounting for the environments, your own abilities, and the opponents. The systems founded here open up more in later games, but I'll never forget Mass Effect the first time I played it. You could just whip out a sniper rifle, line up with an enemy's head, no zoom required, and no-scope them, over and over, weaving in and out of light cover. And that's the thing. In loosening its mechanical requirements, not forcing use of cover except in higher difficulties, freeing itself from the slog of old Bioware fare, you can just kinda slap down damage and it feels great all the way through. I could recommend newcomers the easy mode if they're story-minded, but I think you get that very uniquely Shepard vibe out of normal mode, being a badass space agent who doesn't need to follow even the basic rules of combat to come out on top. While this early title has plenty of fans, it's worth highlighting how incredibly barren the game is, visually speaking, minus the Citadel and Vermeer. And it doesn't help that it makes use of such minimalistic presentation elsewhere. Guns, all your equipment really, isn't rendered in the menu screen, so you get a sea of text on generic blue background. It looks palpably dated for such a futuristic game. Guns don't have particularly evocative names or functions, so they mostly strike the player as stat boosts than true weapons. And indeed, many guns are recolored versions of other guns. This changes in the second game, where a very intentional push towards mass appeal means guns get unique visuals, vastly different functions, and let players latch on, create that kind of attachment both visually and mechanically. Even more so in 3 when you're buying loot crates in the multiplayer mode to level up your favorite. Mass Effect 1 isn't bad, it's threadbare, and that also makes it interesting. Yeah, it's Bioware, it does Bioware things, big shock, people like it, but to blow up this big with something so empty makes me wonder. Was it time and place? Was it how the aesthetics match the reflective serenity of the intro screen? How Shepard is a vessel for the player? Mass Effect feels like a chalice the player pours their own imagination into, artistically reflects the expanse of space, filled with possibility that has to be found.
An impressive diversion. Of course, it was all for nothing.
Or it's the most rancid, stereotypical cop flick ever made. Hard to say.
What? I just like this picture.
Mass Effect's plot isn't mind-blowing and doesn't need a full come-through, but it's worth hitting the beats because many of these evolve or relate to later games. Choice is important, or at least that's the design proposition. And you're the guy. The one guy. To make them all. It's worth noting that while I may have my own play order, you don't have to do anything first. You don't have to recruit Liara until the end. Shit, you don't even have to recruit Garrus on the Citadel. You're forced into plenty of things, but there's a surprising degree of liquidity to the quest, and it's part of the genius of Bioware. You know, I put full games down because of a level I didn't like. Mass Effect hedged its bets on that front. Many players had to Therum first for Liara, makes sense, and the planet's more of a short pit stop with prolonged driving segments than a complete planet. But you also get one of the greatest camera angles for a bad guy ever seen. I need you to understand that part of why Mass Effect owns is the jank, okay? BioWare at that time handled things most studios wouldn't. Piles of text, literally 5 novels worth, alternate voice lines. The priority is in the story. Mountains of plot holes or no, and the creative use of just about anything to make their games look more professional sometimes results in hilarious moments. Truly video gamey stuff. On Pharos, Shepard has plenty of choices, whether to help these guys, whether to save colonists from an attack, whether to free a mentally enslaved Asari. A lot of these choices involve saving people, and it's partly why Mass Effect leans so hard into the Paragon route by design. You can temper off Garrus's more renegade tendencies, you can do good in this world, and it's more intoxicating for an adult player, I think, than throwing up your hands, not really giving a shit, and gunning on through. You know, how often is it that any of us make a difference? To anybody, to a community. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to wear my heart on my sleeve. I mean, whoa, gaming is like Mario, yippee sound effect. Novaria also reckons with that do-gooder mentality, but unlike Pharos, the dynamic is strained. It's significantly easier to act like a renegade purely by mission objectives. You have to uncover some criminal activity, but doing so will put you in the line of fire of hired goons, and you're probably gonna walk out of there with some renegade points. You can so easily turn an area of scientists into enemies by tripping a security laser, with no recourse and no way to surrender. You just have to kill everybody for making an error.
All targets eliminated.
Anyone gonna talk about it? No? Okay.
You're shown Rachni, these lobster things, are violent and monstrous. Getting some Resident Evil 4 vibes here, and you're made to choose whether their queen lives or dies. And while I always choose life, the game frames it like a potential catastrophe, like you should mind your decisions because you won't be able to stay very pure for very long in your position. And it's true. It's incredibly challenging to skate by just being the good guy because being a bastard sometimes gets results quicker. You're literally made to experience the frustration of trying to be a social service, of having strapped resources, in this case time and manpower, and directly intersecting with the galaxy's problems. Mass Effect 1 said "F*** bureaucracy," then made you live it so you hated it. Surreal. You also handle Benezia, Liara's mother, on this planet. Turns out she's been indoctrinated by the Reapers along with Sari, meaning for all her age, her power, her legacy, she's still mortal and susceptible to mind-warping influence from this ancient threat. While she's kind of shuffled off screen, the weight of the loss is important. If a storied Asari matriarch can't resist the Reapers, how can you? Well, like always, keeping your nose to the ground and moving along. Vermeer is one of the game's climax moments because one of these people will die, maybe even two. Bold choice, turning your persistent, continuous RPG series into an episode of Survivor. We've talked about Rex, and that's mostly a minor hiccup. I will always save the boy, because he's just trying his best. But the Caden-Ashley thing is more sensitive. Someone has to arm a bomb and will effectively be pinned by the enemy, unable to escape. Sending Ashley means sending someone I personally dislike to die, and sending Caden means sending a generally good person to die. The math is easy, but moral calculus, I mean. Caden. He died the most boring man I ever met. You fight it out with Saren on Vermeer, and it's just... Imagine flying around like a big dork on your green goblin glider while sputtering like, No, I'm not indoctrinated! I'm not! You're made to chase the guy to Elos, a lost Prothean planet. Part of Mass Effect's genius is presenting so many banal, dry environments, then giving us this overgrown place riddled with blue and orange, which manages to be just vaguely alien enough to sell the space. Especially considering the Protheans' design hadn't been nailed down at the time. Can't bank on finishing a trilogy in this market, brother. You pray and do what you're paid for. Elos holds the last known repository of Prothean pods, but it looks like they're all very dead, having suffocated or run out of food long before the party ever arrives. An AI Prothean starts spilling about the intro squid, and it looks like we've got a galactic threat on our hands. Reapers, synthetic monstrosities that exist beyond charted space who swoop in and devour whole races when they grow too powerful, effectively resetting galactic progress. And not only are they on the way soon, but the Citadel is actually one big Mass Effect relay, teleport point the Reapers use to invade, so with a conveniently placed teleporter, you rush off to the Citadel as Saren and his flagship Sovereign lay directly into the seat of galactic power. Mass Effect ends on a pretty predictable note. You race him down, battle it out, eventually Sovereign seizes control of Saren directly, incredibly clever naming there. You fight a second time, almost die under the rubble. The real decision of importance here involves the Council, who mistrusted you, berated you throughout the game, and are now at your mercy. You can send your Alliance guys in to support them, or let them die. The game frames it like a choice between potentially failing to stop the Reapers or saving the bureaucrats, playing at hero. Once again, framing it like maybe a bad thing to assist them. It's an interesting choice here with some truly insane consequences. The Paragon saves the Council because, really, they're not awful people except for all the awful stuff they presided over like the Genophage, but ignore that. They believed they were operating for the good of all people. The Council has more or less done its job, asked questions, directed you because you work for them, and only mistrusted you because you had no physical evidence when you made a career-ruining accusation. They changed instantly when you produced it. They aren't necessarily deserving of death. I've never chosen to let them die, so I did this time. If you let them live, they persist throughout the series, and frankly, Shepard is drawn away from the Spectres and politicking throughout much of 2, so they kind of fade away for the remainder. If you let them die, however, it's implied that humanity installs its own human-led council in their stead.
But this also presents us with an opportunity. The Citadel fleets were decimated in the attack. Their losses have made the Alliance stronger. They can't rebuild without us. We need to take the lead in forming a new council, one with a human chairman at its head. The other species are scared. They've never faced anything like this before. They don't know what to do. They want us to step forward.
The other races look up to us now. They won't just accept our leadership. they'll welcome it.
I have no earthly idea how that works. The Council must necessarily be funded by its current race's own financiers and initiatives and colonial projects. It's a galactic government. Humans are somehow allowed to, instead of fighting for a place or whatever, straight up perform a coup. One that gives the Alliance and Shepard plausible deniability over the Council's death. It's kind of horrific. Suddenly humans are meant to preside non-representationally over the affairs of all galactic citizens.
To be clear here, because I know someone's already typing, this premise is abandoned going forward, especially in ME2, where politics are almost entirely sidelined, and there's an understanding that maybe it was done to account for both kinds of playstyle, Paragon and Renegade. Maybe it was done because of the writer's swap. Maybe it was done because the ramifications are simply too large. You know, in the human coup version of the galaxy, suddenly Cerberus from ME2 doesn't seem so bad.
The consequences seem resounding, but the game kinda shoves it off. Whatever, your old buddy Anderson will sit on the council. He'll take care of things. He's a likable guy. There has never been a single example of a likable politician quietly performing monstrous acts. Not one. Not one single example. You have to have a working understanding of the real world's geopolitical reality, or I guess any history of war and revolution under your belt, to see how consequential this possible ending is. But again, the game changes focus in 2 and neatly skates by without drawing too much attention to the ramifications of the choice. I think that's one of Mass Effect's greatest failings, across multiple entries, putting such a weighty paradigm shift in the player's very ignorant hands, and at no point meaningfully interrogating what it means, what it implies, especially in the game where acting as the Paragon is so easy, where thinking about others is placed at the very forefront of the experience. At the very least, it's a great Renegade option. Shoot first, don't think too hard about it. So that's what I did for the rest of the series.
I want to expand on the Paragon-Renegade divide here because it is important to how the player interfaces with Mass Effect. Just because they're blue and red does not make Paragon and Renegade good and evil. I mean, mechanically, Paragon-Renegade choices are more like charisma check options that you unlock for having done a certain amount of one kind of behavior in-game. Like, you were such an asshole all game, you're allowed to shoot this guy in this cutscene. Still, the good and evil thing is a pretty understandable flattening of the dynamic, considering Paragon options are overwhelmingly empathetic, Renegade options are broadly non-considerate of the situation, the galactic politics in any given case. Not to mention, Renegade is quite literally might makes right 90% of the time. Also important to mention, Paragon and Renegade changed over time. In the first game, you actually have like a charisma skill that you can build up to help you pass persuasion checks, but that's peeled back in Mass Effect 2 going forward and like relegated to a behind-the-scenes point system that's represented on your character screen. So we watch Paragon and Renegade become interwoven into the game, and the Cruft, the RPG Cruft, is peeled back, shaved off, as Mass Effect 2 became a much more prestige, trendy AAA video game experience. Mass Effect's greatest feature has always been the lineage it allows players to create for themselves, the Ludo reality that you are the sum of your own Shepard's actions, choices, and even character classes. It was a novel feature on the 360. Very few games ever let players carry progress between entries. I think that's half the reason people like Golden Sun. Very few studios ever had the chance to make trilogies, let alone console generation specific trilogies with meaningful player input that altered their continuities. It was a dreadnought, a unicorn. Mass Effect was, among all games of its time, entirely singular. I never bothered to roleplay in my older playthroughs. I picked Infiltrator first, swapped to a Biotic for 2, and hopped back over for the finale. I have almost no memory of my original run of 2 at all. And fair enough, it's so focused on its characters and their stories, it's easy to lose track of yourself living in service to your squad mates, but having a once-in-a-lifetime chance to revisit the series, roleplay, put it on YouTube, I tried to intentionally sample from the platter. Of the 6 Mass Effect classes, I started with Soldier. My Shepard wasn't an engineer or a graphic
anti-gravity wizard, they were a common human with an uncommon ability to stay alive. They lived this long in this incredibly dangerous role with a preternatural ability to thrive where others wilt. I chose to play the Paragon route through the first game because it encourages that kind of behavior naturally, but also because a soldier sticking it out through everything, squatting up with anyone, is the kind of commitment to hope I think would come naturally to an infantryman who keeps pulling through. Mass Effect 2 is an opportunity, though. Players can suddenly test new builds in an action-oriented framework, and narratively, Shepard is totally reconstructed by Cerberus, and who knows how they put him back together. Did they do it right? Did they f*** up? Is assembling Humpty Dumpty as simple as reassembling a shell? So I decided that Cerberus modified him, gave him access to tech abilities and a biotic implant he'd never made use of. Like they tried to turn him into a super soldier, but it screwed with his brain, so now Shepard's fully renegade, pissed at the Alliance, pissed at Cerberus, real ornery-like, and only really moving forward because some part of him is still that paragon of humanity and trying to cling to that legacy, even if his feelings just aren't cooperating. He became a Sentinel, a class I never touched previously because to do two things at once is to do neither, according to a pube guy. And to more fully fit that failed super soldier fantasy with his tech armor, the game was fun. Challenging. Mass Effect on anything but the highest difficulty isn't particularly hard, and the classes can feel a little homogenous in a sense, but they each let the player see through a different lens, handling situations slightly differently, hugging walls more thoroughly, playing aggressively or defensively at different times. Mass Effect 3 was also an opportunity. Sitting on his hands, waiting for the Reapers and kicked out of the Spectres, I decided that Shepard got bored of his own skill, his relentless ability to succeed in the face of overwhelming odds, an actual suicide mission, right? And began pushing his absolute limits with new biotic implants, filling up his newfound freedom and time in preparation for the arrival of the Reapers, making him a pure biotic. It's an explosive and tactical kind of play that runs somewhat counter to the fast and frenetic combat of 3, waiting out your abilities to set up huge biotic combos, but also makes you feel like a god, kind of appropriate for Mass Effect, and this character who survived so much in general. I didn't worry about Paragon and Renegade choices here. This Shepard, at the end of the universe, was not committed to anything other than survival, and he trusted himself in the moment more than anything else. I strongly recommend people try to fictionalize, mythologize about their own run, because very few game series exist that even approach this level of roleplay potential. Dragon Age was at one time a trilogy, but those games are chronologically disjointed, the characters almost entirely disparate. The Witcher trilogy is incredible, but you're always Geralt, with very few meaningful variations. Mass Effect is your legend, however you choose to craft it, and makes for more fun than you might expect.
KBash, I ate your Frankenberry. I'm sorry.
What the hell? This guy ate my Frankenberry? Dialogue wheel. Let's see. No, honestly, thank you for eating my Frankenberry. Those sugars are so bad for me. When will I learn? Oh, what? Yuck. Reset.
You should kill yourself. With a gun.
I did not say that. I didn't. Man, I need one of them Mass Effect 2 Renegade interrupts.
Those who eat my Frankenberry have surrendered their right to life.
Mass Effect 2 is an insane piece of gaming history. It pulled that dusty, meandering space quest screaming into a definitively AAA streamlined cover shooting experience. It killed the main character in minutes. By the end of the intro, Mass Effect made its mission statement known: stack paper.
Oh, that's right.
Many have waffled over the best Mass Effect game, and I choose to abstain from the conversation. Mass Effect is a trilogy, and should be viewed as a trilogy, the sum of its parts. No amount of litigating the worth and value of the old Bioware formula will bring it back. That said, you can understand why some fans, like the OG Bioware enjoyers, weren't big on the changes. Resident Evil 4 is considered basically perfect by a lot of gaming's talking heads, myself included. But there's no question about the prestigification of Resident Evil in Resident Evil 4, and that impulse is immediately apparent in Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 has super weapons. What's next? Turret segments? This is all to say that ME2 is fun. Shoot hard, move fast, slap that reload, baby. This game owns. But there's a tension in the praise, especially from someone like me who enjoys games like Steambot Chronicles and Little Goody Two Shoes. We're watching the effective corporate colonization of a series here, lying down and taking it.
You chose your side, Elnora, and you lost.
Okay, that was pretty cool. I ain't even gonna lie about it, man. That was really cool. Mass Effect 2 intros with Shepard aboard the Normandy, you know, as he often is, suddenly under fire from an unknown assailant. Your craft is torn to shreds, Shepard barely saves Joker's life by shoving him into a pod, and the commander goes down with the ship. This scene is great, watching this storied and palpably triumphant character absolutely demolished by the one thing he can't handle, a lack of oxygen, and like his own human helplessness as he swims through the vacuum of space, strikes such a strong chord and sets expectations early. Mass Effect 2 is not going to be a pleasant game. This is not the curious, hopeful little romp you might have been expecting coming off the first. This game foods. This game comes. This game went to dip a nacho chip in some salsa and rapidly brought it back, but totally dripped some on its shirt. This world hella sucks. I'm killing myself for real. And like the first game, it can be easy to ignore what the premise is saying, so let me spell it out. Shepard dies, but all his people bits are Humpty Dumptied back together by Cerberus, that organization mostly found in text boxes from the original game. Being resurrected and employed by Cerberus is an important framing device here. Mass Effect made a point of showing all the red tape and bureaucracy gumming up our hero's path to justice. Well, good news, buddy. Cerberus is a human supremacist terrorist organization that also performs illegal experimentation. You are definitely aligned with the bad guys, even if Shepard knows exactly who they are and maintains a healthy distrust for their initiative. I've seen internet commenters upset about Kaidan and Ashley in this game, like, ugh, my digital friends criticized me, Commander Shepard, just because I'm getting things done on Cerberus's payroll. This isn't fair. These characters are cringe, buddy. The fact that anybody in this setting, and especially your alien squad mates, don't immediately start blasting when you let on who you're working with, is the greatest act of trust any of them could reasonably give you. If you're gonna blame anyone, blame the scenario writer. Shepard squads up with Cerberus employees Miranda Lawson and Jacob Taylor, escaping the very lab he was reconstructed in when it's attacked by its own security bots, and meets up with the head of Cerberus, the elusive man. Part of the second game's genius has always been its ability to make something look better in frame than it should. The elusive man is an old bigot with very stupid ideas, but because he's got a weird name and a weird room, as an audience, we're bought in. Hell yeah, your elusiveness. Where we dropping, bro? By the way, can you imagine wanting people to trust you and calling yourself the elusive man? Yeah, dude, I'm very ethereal, phantasmagorical, perhaps visually deceptive, maybe verbally deceptive. I don't know. I'm the elusive man. Get f***ing real. Cerberus is supportive enough, though, recognizing Shepard's unique value as the sole savior of all life in the galaxy. Check it out, bro. We made you this new Normandy. It's loaded with doors so we can load more of it in real time. Ignore that we have to gate it off. Got your old doctor back. We even got you this cripple.
I hate that guy.
It's not a stretch to say Mass Effect 2 might as well have dropped in from another series entirely. Without the setting, the dressing, the fact this game remembers I let those hostages explode.
What did I just do? Oh no. Oh no.
I mean, it really doesn't play anything like the original. You're sent off on missions to all kinds of planets. That hasn't changed, but the exploration is significantly limited. There's no more free-roaming planetary excavation, okay? You're a guy with narratively limited time trying your hardest to gather a team of soldiers to pull off an impossible job for Cerberus. You can scan planets for materials, and you will say thank you. That means gameplay turns into hallway effect, funnel effect. You're guided through straight shot corridors and occasionally waltz into a big open kill room. And that's if you're lucky. What the is happening? Hey, did you know? They replaced the Mako with this weird thing. It only pops up in additional DLC content. How bizarre. The rest of the game takes place in moments, ducking behind cover, lining up shots, commanding your squad, and taking chances to aggressively advance and capitalize on lulls in the enemies, suppressing fire. It's sometimes tactical, sometimes furious, generally always fun, but again, it's completely reflavored for mass appeal. And don't you worry, the loss of freewheeling through the galaxy is not a diminishment of, quote, content. You've got plenty to do. Recruiting the biggest squad in any of the Mass Effect games, getting to know every one of them, completing all of their individual loyalty missions, and desperately probing as many planets as possible to upgrade your ship and your arsenal. It's a lot to contend with, and the game I spent the most time on. If Mass Effect is its characters, Mass Effect 2 is the ultimate Mass Effect experience, even if it's not necessarily the best one. This is the same universe, but it's careful to crop the available locales to feed the player a grittier, physically, texturally grittier version of the series. The original was grim too, but it was more the loneliness, staring out at it all. Thousands of years of human evolution for what? The sequel is more about the slums, the red light districts, the wastes of the Krogan home planet Tuchanka. Yes, you're whisked away to the sleek Ilium and the English garden-esque Citadel, but even there, you're so often rooting through the underbelly, the loading docks and hangars, feeling like an outcast in the Citadel in general, cracking heads and trudging through the shit that you're never fully allowed to experience the peaceful place you thought the universe might be. For all of Mass Effect's hopeful promise, you're left with the grim truth that people are shit all over the universe. Just pigs and shit.
There. I just saved you about 9 days of running around. That said, you should head up to the Presidium.
You can't sway me with a Canadian. I am a Canadian. I know what he's done. It might be best to describe Mass Effect 2 as focused on the micro, highlighting some choice spots of color in the big drab reality of space, wherever things are hot, wherever lights are bright, and of course, keeping that vision clean and controlled because there just isn't enough dev time to round out an entire galaxy. After environments and combat, characters are the game's third major pillar. The cast is enormous. It's genuinely daunting recruiting all of these guys with a mission and realizing you gotta hang out with all of them again for 30 minutes at a time. Listen, fellas, I just don't have that much time. I made it anyway. My marriage is failing. She's taking the PS5. I will never recover these losses. I always bench the initial human companions. Yeah, cool. Miranda, Jacob, whatever. Can we get the lizard guy in here? Maybe a blue person? Anything cool? Mass Effect 2 does something neat by expanding the various kinds of abilities actually available in-game. A lot more biotic abilities exist, new tech and combat options too, but also massively streamlines what allies are capable of. You have access to more than your allies, in a phrase, and it means you're basically always the alpha version of whatever class. At the same time, the slimming down of ally options and expansion of total extant moves means 2 biotics can be flavored entirely differently. 2 sentinels, completely unique. Miranda is, for all intents and purposes, a sentinel. She accesses tech and biotic abilities, but she also buffs allies and focuses more on biotics in general. My sentinel, with its tech armor, walks in and does damage, because I'm the Terminator. In that sense, it's not worthwhile explicitly commenting on every character's class, but what their effective role is in the party. Miranda's a commanding Cerberus officer, so she controls the field and helps allies. Makes sense. Miranda comes from a wealthy background, but her life is a nightmare. She's basically genetically engineered human perfection, burdened by incredible expectations and the suffocating knowledge that her father merely kept this Miranda, while the other experimental versions were discarded. I feel like someone told the character designers they needed a bombshell GF in space, so they laced her with an interrogation into unrealistic beauty standards, relative privilege, and the casual horrors of science gone beyond fiction. She only becomes loyal if you help her track down her younger sister and help her seek protection from their father. Loyalty is important. You want your crewmates loyal for the ending sequence, the infamous suicide mission, but you only get it for helping them individually. Jacob Taylor is funny because while he served in the Alliance military and was present for the attack on Eden Prime, the Geth attack from the intro to ME1, the Alliance's response caused him to grow disillusioned with politicians and bureaucrats, and so he left, and eventually teamed up with Cerberus for a chance at helping the galaxy without, of course, all that red tape. It's just, how are we still doing this line on Game 2? That's just Garrus, but maybe slightly worse. At least Garrus didn't join up with Cerberus, like what? Mind you, Buddy grows additionally disillusioned with Cerberus in 3, so it's not like he's stupid. Life happens, you fall into things, fair enough. He cheats on a female shepherd if you romance him. Jacob's loyalty mission involves tracking down his long-lost father who's declared himself king of the stranded scientists or whatever, and it's all very hokey, very cable television business. A lot of the loyalty missions involve characters' pasts, but they're always so removed from the momentum of the plot they feel generally irrelevant. I do wish they at least tied into the Collectors or Reapers or the Genophage or the Geth situation. Some do. Not often enough, though. We could have never bothered, and it probably would have kept Bro just as happy, only this time he doesn't die for free in the suicide mission.
To be super clear, here, this isn't bad inherently. Many of these side stories are the micro I was talking about, zooming into individual lives lived in the galaxy. One would argue ME2 was the perfect opportunity. The first game set up the premise, the third game concludes it. Why not look into the all the weird alleys and nooks and crannies of the galaxy? Perfect timing, great timing. I only mention it because the actual point-by-point plot of Mass Effect 2 has been criticized for being incredibly threadbare, for being 1, 2, 3 major story missions. And it is a bit of a shame because with this threadbare plot, so many opportunities are missed. We don't really get to see what it's like to be an Outer Rim colonist or whatever, where the Collectors are coming to ruin. We see that scene in a main story mission, but we don't actually know anyone from that background. Character backstories are opportunities. We don't really get to see what it's like to be a human colonist outside of council jurisdiction in a human-led council. You know, these political realities are kind of frittered away because instead we're focusing on Jacob's backstory or whatever. Again, as an older person, it becomes increasingly understandable why people who were very big fans of Bioware and Mass Effect 1 reacted so poorly to the game, because they felt so much of this political reality that was established in the first game was fucked completely, just ignored to do something else entirely, like a pivot, a full pivot. It's crazy.
The other party members are found through Cerberus leads, people you're headhunting explicitly for the suicide mission. They're all dangerous or powerful or knowledgeable per the lore, but I cannot stress enough that you can quite literally solo this game on normal mode. Maybe not exactly, but they've been downgraded to utility status. Character builds are so obviously stripped that you might as well just go default difficulty renegade path, guns blazing. They're here, they're cool. It's a shame they're kind of overshadowed by the legend that is Shepard. But that's the price of narratively basing the game around the one man who can save the galaxy. You actually pick up a number of other human characters, unsurprising for Cerberus, but admittedly 2 of them were once DLC, now massively available in the Legendary Collection. Jack is an unstable, extremely powerful biotic, the result of brutal testing, training, and punishment at the hands of Cerberus operatives. She's coarse, truly miserable to talk to, and doesn't trust you or Cerberus, but is willing to cooperate with Shepard since he's giving her a ticket out of a mercenary prison she wound up in thanks to her violent pissant life. Shepard gives her food and shelter, and he's helpful in her personal revenge on Cerberus. She'll ask for classified documents and you can appease her, but Jack's true value is making it very clear to the player how monstrous Cerberus is. Both the Elusive Man and Miranda are quick to deny the Cerberus abduction and experimentation on children and the severity of this crime, claiming it was the fault of the facility's operators going rogue. But culpability is hard to handwave here. If Jack is what human progress looks like, then Cerberus's entire proposition is suspect. Hair is not a crime. Mind you, even Jacob disagrees with Cerberus on some key points. It's mostly an organization for dregs and outcasts. It's extremely weird we didn't get a harsher retelling of Ashley here, a real human supremacist, considering you're finally working for them. But for Shepard's compliance to be believable, they probably felt they had to sidestep all the yucky stuff. Kasumi Goto is a thief. That's about it. You help her break into some rich asshole's mansion and steal her partner's gray box, a neural implant of some kind that stores data and could cause a galactic war because of some crime the Alliance committed that it has proof of. And it's got the receipts. I wish I could call her more interesting, but she feels like an excuse to have another rich, opulent environment to do cool undercover agent stuff for $4.99 plus tax and generally highlight the tenuous state of the galaxy, as if we didn't know that already. Zaid Mass Effect is a guy. The guy. The galaxy's most dangerous bounty hunter. So dangerous he actually shoots first in a cutscene before you have the chance. That never happens. That's like playing dicks on the table and Commander Shepard getting white dwarfed, if you understand my turn of phrase. Once again, Zaid is fun, but not unlike Kasumi, mostly exists to do cool dude stuff. You help him get revenge on some guy trademark.
Oh my god.
And he quite literally does the cool guys don't look at explosions bit. Bro, shut the f up. You're not even in the base game. You're extraneous. You're disposable. We don't need a second Renegade Shepard in here, okay? I did my dues. Step aside, please. The more interesting stories come out of the aliens. But before that, we gotta check in with Tali and Garrus. They're the only properly returning crew members of the original game. After the Normandy blowed up and you hurtled through your untimely death, the crew all got the ick, something fierce, and left. Really? Dying in space? Beta! Liara went and became a Shadow Broker operative. Ashley or Caden stayed with the Alliance and can't believe you're working for terrorists. Rex is sitting on his Tachanka throne or straight up dead depending on your choices. Tali is initially concerned about your new friends, but figures you're a good guy and joins up, though it's terse, tense. Old players probably didn't like seeing the state of the old squad when 2 rolled around. They didn't choose Cerberus, the devs did. They didn't want to piss off their digital friends, it just happened. But that's true to life as well. A little friction makes the experience richer and better for roleplay. It takes these people closer to people than a digital cheerleader troop. In fact, you have to win your old squad mates' loyalty. Yeah, you don't get that for free. That's how bad Shep looks right now, or how bad his friends' lives are currently. Up to interpretation, I guess. Tali gets charged with treason. I wasn't kidding, man. Jesus Christ. And you find out her father did some accidentally awful things that caused inoperative Geth to awaken and tear up a ship and its crew. You clear her name, mostly through Shepard telling everyone to shut the f up, she's coming with me, and everyone claps. The end.
It is known that all poo-poo times are pee-pee times, but isn't it true that not all pee-pee times are poo-poo times?
Holy shit, dude. He's right! Garrus is a little more concerning. You find out he's been in a prolonged shootout and needs help, and he's running with a code name, Archangel. Garrus took up a life of hard vigilantism after realizing he was really good with a gun, and instead of serving the people, would rather shoot desperate boobs for cash, or something less sinister if you were a paragon in one. He's hard to sympathize with here. This is exactly where he was headed after tanking his CSEC gig in his own family's name, but we also get the uncomfortable development of the guy turning increasingly cruel. You see it in his loyalty mission, the way he bullies this weaker person, the way he stomps and grinds on him. And it's not undeserved per se. The guy is directly responsible for
disappearing the guy who caused Garrus' own assembled crewmates' deaths.
10 of Garrus' allies, his very own pseudo-Normandy squad he created after Shepard died. But the point is, Garrus enjoys violence and the power he has over people he believes deserve punishment. He wouldn't call himself Archangel otherwise. A dumbass would probably say the game's glorifying vigilantism, but I don't think that's true. I think it's entirely apparent, especially played with older eyes, exactly how gross of a person he's becoming, and that frankly you can see why, and you're not sure if you can help. He barely has anything to say about Cerberus. He's just one of the guys, as it were, and I think that's part of what makes him a fan favorite. There's something under there, like if you appealed to his basic decency, you could save him, maybe, but he's spiraling pretty dangerously and still totally cool on the surface. Still your old bro. I know this guy. I think other people have met this guy, and that's the pull, the draw to the inevitable train wreck, hoping your friend gets better when it seems he's stuck on his little downward path, regardless of your influence. Samara is an ancient Asari Justicar, 1,000 years old, immovable and resolute. You'd think that much time lived would give someone a much more gray view on things and openness to the possibilities of the universe, people's idiosyncrasies, whatever else, but instead she's only crystallized her own vision of the universe, as codified by the order she belongs to, and holds fast to those standards. Shepard brushes up against her code, and this isn't new. Bioware has a very long history of interrogating player decisions by using foils and other concerned citizen characters to raise eyebrows. I used to dislike these kinds of characters, but I was young, and enjoy them much more now. They help develop the world, break away from the singularity of the player perspective, and a light to other possibilities. They're a chance to temper your steel. By existing as her hardline, genuine self, she provides a strong role-playing foil to a player's maybe less considered stumblings through the galaxy.
Oh, Krogan! The Krogan Rebellion!
You talk too much.
See? The human cannot hit a simple target!
Yeah, like that. Samara's loyalty comes from helping her track down her wayward daughter, an Ardat Yakshi. This is gonna be a lore dump. One sec. Being an Ardat Yakshi means having a genetic condition. These Asari are compelled to mate, and mating, which Asari do by mind melding rather than straight intercourse, hemorrhages the mate's brain and in turn makes the Ardat Yakshi smarter, stronger, etc. They get more powerful by having sex and inadvertently hospitalizing or killing their mates outright. Normally, they face execution or isolation, and they're a shame to Asari culture. Funny concept.
What if there were a woman and she had bad and evil sex?
We hunt down Samara's daughter Morinth, bait her into the deed, and Samara blows in to put her down. Alternatively, you can let Morinth kill Samara and have her replace her on the roster. But if you romance her at any point, you're hitting the game over screen.
Embrace eternity.
Oh, I nutted too hard.
I originally had a whole romance segment planned up where I talked about the various romances you can choose to engage with throughout the games, but like is true to Mass Effect, I'm not going to talk about every single possibility for every single story beat, so why do that with romance? It is totally player discretionary, and not only that, you don't even have to engage in any kind of romance, in any kind of relationship if you don't want to. Like, Bioware kind of understood the assignment in that there is no real mechanical benefit for romance. It is just something that organically happens between two people, and I think that's beautiful. I also saw that Mass Effect was listed on a series of woke games in a big spreadsheet, and I just wanted to say how disappointed I am with gamers for kind of weirdly aligning themselves with old Fox News tabloid pablum shit. Guys, did we lose the plot?
Mordin Solus has a violent past and knows how to kill, but he's also a doctor these days, one who wants to atone for his past crimes by healing the damage he's caused. He's not like Samara, he won't ask questions about your decisions unless they very specifically intersect with his interests, but man, I love older characters like Mordin and Samara. They both caused untold strife in their youth and only want to heal, only want to make the universe better. Different means, sure, but it's the same takeaway. The young burn a path through life and spend their older years trying to plant flowers over the damage.
Mordin helped modify the Krogan genophage when they were found to be naturally recovering from it.
And you're made to help him find what his old assistant has done with the research. Well, out of raw guilt, Malin's helping out one of the clans research a cure for the genophage, and while you shut down the project and can save or wipe the data at your discretion, it's important to note that everyone involved with the genophage is shown understanding the weight of what they've done. The utter immorality of the project is never in question by the scientists involved, only the bureaucrats who consistently insist that the Krogan were a problem and couldn't be stopped otherwise. It's such a frustrating issue to dig into because the genophage is absolutely beyond the purview of Commander Shepard, whatever his personal morals are regarding eugenics and ethnic cleansing. For all we know, the Krogans may very well have obliterated the galaxy, but it seems unlikely. Strong or not, this is a universe of gravity magic, weapons beyond understanding, and brother, the chunk is looking rough. There had to be a point where they could have been disempowered slightly without causing their indirect extinction. It's fascinating, but probably not as complex as they want you to imagine. In a world full of geniuses, why is it only the most extreme, decisive measures are taken? Probably for power consolidation with no regard to the effective cost. Thane is a Drell, a race new to Mass Effect 2. I love that. The reality of game dev means the universe can only expand game over game as the ability to expand a project is greenlit with money. This is quite literally an example of what I'm talking about when I say art intersects directly with capital. Thane is an assassin. He's also spiritual, terminally ill, just a roster full of character quirks. He's hard to dislike. It's good to interact with somebody who's at least a little self-aware about all the killing the characters get up to. After all, Thane may be an assassin, but I guarantee his kill count is lower than whatever Shepard's running total is. Only difference is, one's subsidized by the Alliance military or a terrorist organization.
I don't like mercenaries.
An assassin is just a precise mercenary.
Are you, even kind of aware of who you work for?
You can help Thane connect with his son, and it's compelling for the same reasons as Thane's self-awareness is. His son is tempted into Thane's way of life, violence, but Thane desperately wants a better life for the guy, one he couldn't provide. Grunt is a tank-born Krogan, immediately at odds with the world and his own people, something like how boomers might look at zoomers, okay? Grunt is the most skibbity member of the crew, and he's a little hard to like. He doesn't have the consideration or the raw cynicism of Rex. He's just a big idiot baby, a child weapon, and he's hard to connect with at that level. You end up acting something like a father to the guy, so the dynamic is definitely unique, and he brushes up against deep-rooted Krogan tradition in a way that's at least kind of refreshing for how dour it all is, how consistently aliens become caricatures of their own cultures. Grunt's loyalty mission involves ensuring his rite of passage into Krogan adulthood goes unimpeded. As usual, there are impediments, but to Shepard, it was Tuesday.
Legion is a little odd. From the first game, the first mission, the Geth were enemies, but Legion here, the first individual Geth, even though it's still coming around to its individuality, can join Shepard on his mission. Legion and its consequences are a whole thing that ends up boiling over into the third game, but suffice it to say that Legion joins last, isn't super impactful in the story, and doesn't get the chance to linger very long in the story unless you let a number of your own crew die at one point, and is generally kept at a distance for fairly obvious reasons. Legion's loyalty can be secured by dealing with a faction of heretic Geth, that is, some of the Geth loyal to the Reapers, because they have access to code that threatens to corrupt the peaceful Geth. You're left to decide whether to destroy or merely overwrite the pro-Reaper Geth, which is a frustrating choice. On one hand, saving lives, if they are indeed lives, should probably be paramount, but destruction respects their individual will. You never wince shooting a desperate mercenary schlub, but here I am, sincerely asking whether it's good and right to do either of these things. After all, if they can be rewritten, am I making choices the Reapers would make?
Geth aren't like organic life. Don't apply our morality to them.
That is logical. You agree with that? No two species are identical. All must be judged on their own merits. Treating every species like one's own is racist.
I think that wording is a little rough though, my friend, because if all races must be judged on their unique merits, you end up making a passive argument for legislating different races differently, which is a direct ticket to Hell World. Though I'm going to assume what the writer was trying to say was treat other people equitably, not with raw equality, but according to their own needs. Anyway, admittedly, the non-Reaper species of the galaxy are sympathetic, and indoctrination is something the Reapers do to force hegemony for the purpose of total compliance and annihilation. So we're not really approaching their level meaningfully. Ultimately, Legion is useful for weighing how interested the player is in playing at moral calculus until the third game, where we have to get really uncomfortable. Two pairs of squad mates have rivalries that boil over. Miranda and Jack start fighting upon completing their loyalty missions, putting that loyalty in jeopardy. Tali and Legion will do the same. In either case, you're able to smooth things over after the fight, even if you couldn't use Paragon or Renegade options to verbally beat them down. Alternatively, you can persuade them with a high enough score in either category, but the ratio is flipped. One needs a Renegade score equal to 70% of the total acquirable Renegade points, and vice versa. So it's pretty challenging to simply appeal to all parties. The game doesn't want you to. It wants you to fight, experience conflict, understand what's at stake and why everyone cares so much. It wants you to buy into the fiction, because without that, what's the point? You can follow a guide and have a perfect run, but at that point you're just robbing yourself of feelings so you can close the book on another happily ever after. You know, the older I get and the more I start to understand the value of roleplay as a concept, the more frustrating it is seeing all these the true ending guides and 100% guides for Mass Effect, making sure all my dudes get home alive and everything works out the correct way, as though that were ever a proposition. What do you think? What does it mean to you? That's why Bioware makes these games! There's some merit in completing the loyalty missions of characters beyond raw narrative value. Every character has a final skill locked behind loyalty, some of the strongest abilities in the game, and provided they're unlocked, you can even train one of them up for yourself with a certain upgrade. The squad gets stronger when it's tighter. Pretty standard mechanical expression of the narrative, but letting Shepard access some of it, some extra knowledge beyond his base abilities for a particularly tight bond, that is perfect. Thank you, Legion, for teaching me how to get the yield boost. Mass Effect is a pretty funny title. It says nothing to an outsider, but in universe it refers to the tech that allowed humanity to advance in all kinds of ways, jumping through space, precision toothbrushes, even space magic, which is part of the game's genius. Create a gritty sci-fi universe, explain it all with this novel-length codex, and then do the science fiction in combat, okay? Huck a Mass Effect field at another human being and watch him sail through the air like a ragdoll. The fiction directly intersects with the game's engine. This is uniquely video games. This rules.
Look, he's a floater!
Mass Effect 2 recontextualized the Paragon-Renegade dynamic, maybe unintentionally. First, you're directly employed by Cerberus, and for whatever reason, Shepard finds that acceptable. To be clear, Cerberus is a human supremacist terrorist organization that even Ashley dislikes. When Shepard acts as a Paragon, there's a sense that he's acting as a paragon of true humanity, not the ones that want to blow up X group of people. And did. But the humanity that sees a comrade struggling and offers support, compassion, time, gets to know his squad mates and even his support staff, a man of the people, all people, someone with whom you've got a friend in. Ending a sentence on a preposition is generally considered a renegade move. Renegade players act on their worst instincts. That hasn't changed, but with Mass Effect 2's incredible presentation, it's just really funny.
How about goodbye?
There aren't a lot of games like Mass Effect 2. It's not often you get laughed at by an opposing squad and get the chance to make them look incredibly stupid or dead in a cutscene. It's not often you can send a man shrieking to his death for being generally uncooperative. This is not the same Renegade from the first game. That Shepard was misinformed, short-tempered, or overly burdened with the weight of galactic human affairs, entirely too military to remember to consider the worth of those he came into contact with, and was maybe a little too drunk on the power known as Spectre immunity. Mass Effect 2 Shepard is a monster. This guy just found out his boss is his wife. This guy just realized his mother wrote him out of the will. Renegade Shepard in 2 will find you, and he will kill you. Except for fun, and not to save his daughter or whatever. I touched on the ramifications of squad combat and difficulty, but it's worth noting here that normal mode does have a narrative issue. On normal, pending any kind of player incompetency, there's almost never a need to actually make extensive or even frequent use of the pause menu. No real need to command your squad. No real need to micromanage their equipped weapons and skills during combat, something you do constantly, moment to moment, on insanity difficulty. Normal mode necessarily cannot convey the squad vibe of Mass Effect, the idea that Shepard crewed up with all these distinct and interesting personalities and went on meaningful adventures with them. Normal mode actively resists the Paragon concept that you're merely representing the human perspective because you can handle everything on your own in real time with no real help. Conversely, normal mode is incredible for the Renegade route. Crew up, sure, but stay out of my way and stay useful, because I'm killing these shit-asses dead. Most players could skate by on easy mode just sucking up the story, but I think to really get at the heart of the game, higher difficulties can help mechanically convey the narrative path you've chosen better. I do think that Mass Effect's story is a little strained at times, and that makes the Renegade path that much more satisfying. It's just funnier. It knows the truth about Mass Effect, that even in the first game, it was about being a bad action movie or traditional low-budget sci-fi. It's just really, really loud about it. I mean, I don't even care if the story sucks or the gameplay is too AAA for people. This shit is funnier than 90% of video games.
You know, for a bunch of cheap touristy crap, your prices are pretty high.
I am sorry you feel that way. There are many stores on the Citadel. Perhaps another would be more in your price range.
So, you're saying I'm poor? Just because I'm not as well off as you doesn't mean you can hold yourself above me.
What? No,
Hey, everyone! This store discriminates against the poor!
So Mass Effect 2's story is handled a bit differently than the first game. This is not Le Bioware classic,
selecting which of 3 places to go, filling out your squad, and solving everybody's problems, with unique moments thrown in to canonize your specific playthrough. Now, Mass Effect 2 gives you some dossiers, says hop to it, and that order is up to you, sure, but collecting X number of squad mates will greenlight the next actual plot beat, emerging like a great spire from the sea of character recruitment quests and loyalty missions. Or like that short. The first major beat is a face-off with the Collectors. You fight Geth sometimes, but Collectors are ME2's real opposition, this insectoid race of captors who swoop in, paralyze whole colonies, and abduct them to some nefarious end. The first Collector battle is important for establishing exactly what Shepard is siding with Cerberus to prevent. The Alliance military is somehow unable to protect disparate colonies, and for what it's worth, the Elusive Man does initially care about human interests. Protecting people is seemingly his entire reason for acting as he does. And there's the temptation to think that were things different, people like the Elusive Man wouldn't have to exist. The same sneering disillusionment with the systems as they exist is alive and well in Mass Effect 2. I dislike the premise. I think it diminishes the good institutions and systems actually manage to accomplish, the way some certain individuals in the real world disavow the same government regulation that ensures your tap water isn't tainted, that provides public services like garbage collection. But that's why the Elusive Man is sitting in the villain's chair. Instead of bothering with the exhausting busy work of trying to work with the systems as they are to improve the galaxy, he's chosen to circumvent them entirely, often to disastrous, genuinely evil ends. The second major beat involves a showdown at an apparently abandoned collector ship. You can unlock a whole extra type of gun your class usually couldn't use, and shoot a bunch of bugs. Mass Effect is a game where you shoot bugs. See? I wasn't even lying though. After this, it's just the suicide mission. That threadbare. Whew. Mass Effect 2 is pretty strapped for major plot beats that specifically matter to Shepard. You could throw out whole swaths of these characters and the effects would be minimal. Thane doesn't need to exist, even if he's cool and everyone loves it. The DLCs are purely extraneous. They were planned as add-ons. They don't help round out this specific plot particularly well. So many missions are just there, but that's kind of the beauty and the point of Mass Effect 2. They say, and I often say, less is more, but I look at Mass Effect as a series you invest in, something you let wash over you. It's not unlike the novel War and Peace, where more is definitely more. Shame so much of it is cropped hallways. In a world that might have just repeated Mass Effect 1, the stock Bioware special, the sequel made an intentional pivot into the private, the personal, the micro, to more thoroughly flesh out its world and get players invested in new sites and new characters, in the possibilities for what this series could be. No longer simply strapped to the old KOTOR baggage, but truly definitively unique. It just happens they kept the overtly recognizable humanity of the first game at the cost of anything truly alien and decided to sell the most schlocky, kind of action sci-fi television show possible.
Please, I have a son.
A son? Shut up!
Even if ME2's actual plot is kind of thin, and even if they're focusing more on the micro, sometimes those micro moments have series-spanning implications or they're relevant to the totality of the Mass Effect story. Consider the Batarians, who are broadly ignored in the main plot of Mass Effect 1 and largely relegated to side content. They pop up in ME2 as kind of weird bruiser guys, and if you aren't reading the Codex or paying attention to anything, it's easy to forget that humans and Batarians have historical conflict in-universe. They're arguably humanity's #1 galactic enemy. So when the player decides to run the Mass Effect Arrival DLC and end up killing off 300,000 or so Batarians to stop an impending Reaper invasion, mind you, buying the galaxy 6 months, the micro rapidly turns into the macro. And while this event doesn't have any highly noticeable effects on ME3, though there are a few, we're getting critical universe context here. For all the glitz and glamour and for all the fun cop action romp nonsense, Shepard's as much a war hero as he is a war criminal. And the Mass Effect universe is absolutely laced with that controversial kind of material. It's part of why it's so much fun to talk about, The player knows they don't have a choice in the matter. Depiction is not endorsement. Of course, then you go on Reddit and people are, LARPing like neo-Nazis about the Batarian race, and that's all fun and That's fun to talk about. One of Mass Effect's best features, and this goes for the whole trilogy, is the inevitable crisis moment each game builds towards. Though it's smaller in the first game, a confrontation on a tropical planet comparable to KOTOR and a choice over the life of a party member. Mass Effect 2 kicked that energy into overdrive. You work towards a suicide mission, building your roster, upgrading your ship, and gaining the loyalty of your crew. For this final sequence that is so consequential, it caused millions of players to follow a guide, obliterating any meaningful role-playing for the purpose of saving their precious digital friends. And I get that. I did it too, way back when, and really, it's not so hard to skate by unscathed if you know what you're doing. It's also much more understandable because back in the day, characters would seemingly die off, even when the player did everything right, or thought they did, leading people to claim the sequence was just broken. It became mythical, something like sailing into the Bermuda Triangle. I did everything right. I checked my gear, but what if, generally speaking, as long as the player completes every loyalty mission and speaks to 3 specific characters, asks for their input on ship upgrades, and buys those upgrades, the final hurdle is just delegating work. The game asks for leaders and a tech specialist, and you've got Cerberus officers, Garrus and Tali and Legion, on top of a biotic to fend off collectors. It's not overly complicated, but feels electric in the moment, like you're really in danger the entire time. And that helped propel Mass Effect 2 into the spotlight as one of the greatest games ever made. A story players invested in, strong drama from start to finish, hilarious renegade choices, and an ending sequence you can only describe as mythical. The actual events aren't overly surprising. You rescue the captured crew of the Normandy. If you took too long, you hear horrific accounts of how the collectors put people into pods, which reduce them to goo, which naturally traumatizes the surviving members, and you battle it out in a very drawn-out sequence through the collector base. Whoa, Mal! There's something so timeless about the torso boss. Baby Bowser, various God of War bosses. It is so insane to see this at the end of a Mass Effect game, but it's so deeply AAA gaming. I guess I'll just clap. Yeah, good job, Reapers. Make a big human out of the human goop. That'll get him. Now, at the end here, you're given the choice to control the Reapers, flip the script through the elusive man's prodding. Buddy shows his hand here, and with our current knowledge, we know it's a bad idea. Saren was exposed and eventually indoctrinated, so the elusive man could easily fall victim. He does not know what he's playing with. It's basically the core moral question behind Mass Effect. Should you control things or simply let them organically exist? Do you give the Geth free will? Do you let the Krogan breed freely? Mass Effect 2 is the very definition of something lost, something gained. It was distinctly weird for Bioware, moving into a decidedly AAA space that the original game never really approached. I think the AAA-ification of Mass Effect had benefits, a lot of them, actually. 2 was presented with such confidence, such stark coloring and lighting, as many visual tricks as possible to cover up the Bioware animations, to convincingly sell an edgier, grittier version of a universe long plagued by those damn dirty bureaucrats. I think it unintentionally glorifies a kind of violence that's fairly gross, and it's hard to call the thing timeless. The asshole cop routine only gets worse as years pass. This stuff would have had the whole theater cheering 30 years ago, but we're moving on as a species, growing more aware of the vectors of power that impact people's lives, and how Shepard, serving a violent organization, ultimately put him in the same position as the Spectres, a mad dog without a leash. This one just so happens to be in the business of saving the galaxy, so it's hard to throw shade. You know what, guys? This look at the game's design lineage isn't really doing it for me in light of Mass Effect 3, right? We gotta get the fuller picture here. Mass Effect Galaxy, an iOS game made in 2009, a prequel and tie-in for the launch of 2. It was a game, and it existed. Mass Effect Infiltrator, mimicking the general play of Mass Effect 2 and 3, was a joint launch with 3, March 6, 2012. The title implies you play as an infiltrator, but you use biotic abilities. Why would they do this? Are they stupid? Mass Effect has an animated film. Can we pull up the Wikipedia page real quick? Mass Effect Paragon Lost is a 2012 American-Japanese adult animated science fiction action film set in the Mass Effect science fiction universe. Who writes this shit? Or maybe we should mention the short fan film. Or maybe we should mention the amusement park ride Mass Effect New Earth. Or maybe we shouldn't spend time focusing on derivative works with differing creative staff that don't bespeak the design lineages of these main games, because focus is a good thing, and I love the design reality behind Mass Effect Infiltrator that a tie-in for 3. If you go look at the dev interviews, you find out that Mass Effect originally was going to have a DS game, Mass Effect Corsair, a first-person experience designed for the DS. I'm sure it would be just about as fun as the Call of Duty DS games, but there's a quote implying that EA predicted low sales for the DS, meaning the game concept evolved into a mobile game. And I'm gonna tell you, this is why you can't care about every little side project. It's capitalism. These things were brought into existence, conceptualized to get sales. While I love the current wave of games as art, it is so important to recognize, if we want to be serious, that not every vector of an IP comes from divine inspiration, comes from that very pure artistic place. I mean, are we gonna talk about how you can recruit Jessica Chobot? IGN's Jessica Chobot, romance her in ME3? What? I need to tell you about my gaming obsession, Mass Effect 3's multiplayer. Back in the 360 era, plenty of games that had no business whipping out a multiplayer mode were getting directed by publishers to nab a piece of the pie. Xbox Live Gold memberships were hot, DLC was relatively new, and the gaming world was primed for a bleeding unlike any other, an outright massacre. Mass Effect multiplayer. Bioware, or maybe I should say EA, packaged the first ever Mass Effect multiplayer experience with the third game. You could select it from the intro screen, you could earn war effort points through the multiplayer, a genuine parallel means of contributing to the ending of Mass Effect. Mind you, the Legendary Edition doesn't feature this mode, and you have to get it on Steam, on top of a few updates, to even queue up. But the servers are active and people catch games to this day. It was fun, still is, honestly, and has the unique distinction of being the only way to jump into the shoes of someone other than Commander Shepard. Mass Effect is a beautiful series, this rippling galactic adventure full of vibrant takes on basically Star Wars, Star Trek, etc. But for all those squad mates, all those Neato alien chums, you never get to be them. And why not? Why not have a swap to tally button? Is that so wrong? Is selecting Miranda and only being able to view her from the posterior angle an issue to you, BioWare? So the multiplayer mode was the only way to actually inhabit those diverse and interesting people. Asari, Solarians, Turians, Krogans, Batarians, Geth, Vorcha, Mamma Mia! Kylang ninjas, bro, what? In that sense, the multiplayer mode isn't some throwaway, extraneous little thing. Okay, it mattered. It had series-spanning importance. You could become a Geth infiltrator, arm up with a Claymore shotgun, and rob the game blind. You could finally control a Solarian who wasn't partially responsible for an ethnic cleansing incident. You could finally wield a sword in a Mass Effect game. The actual goal of the missions wasn't complicated. It was basic wave defense, something like Horde mode in Gears of War. You squad up against Cerberus, the Geth, the Reapers, with each faction having different enemy designs, different things to watch out for, different armor types, and different boss enemies.
No, I'm not a noob! I'm not a noob, Lord! I'm not!
4 players entered, cooperatively taking objectives and staying alive as the game doled out tougher enemies. You were made to survive 10 rounds to extract, and failure would meet with poor rewards. There were bronze, silver, and gold versions of stages, vaguely representing easy, normal, and hard mode, and you really needed to work as a team to pull through. It was that era, and people had bad internet. You had to pray your allies weren't rubber banding all over the map. Mass Effect took a shot at a multiplayer experience and successfully made the best co-op game mode, so perfectly aligned with what the series was doing, trying to communicate, at least that I've ever touched. You just can't beat loading in as a Krogan vanguard and wreaking havoc. You never forget flying into your enemies in front of everyone and getting help when you fall. Of course, EA mucked up the artistic integrity by including some of, if not the very first, loot crates. You'd earn credits for winning missions, more for increasing difficulties, and spent them on crates, with random rewards, character unlocks, new weapons, upgrades for weapons, consumable items like healing packs. The game wanted you to keep playing it forever. Firstly, to unlock everything, but also to stay stocked up on all the consumables. The trick is, you could buy crates from the store, and when you really wanted to play as a Krogan, maybe you buy a few packs. Or a whole lot more than a few packs. It was disgustingly predatory and such an obvious, awful shift away from what BioWare was. It was the face of modern AAA practices and part of what soured me on consoles and AAA games in general. Yeah, you didn't have to engage with it, but you really had to work to get all the characters, the guns. Shit, guns scaled up to level 10, meaning you had to unlock the same rare gun 10 times to have the best version of it. While I love the mode and how perfect an encapsulation of Mass Effect's goal it represented, that simple addition tainted the entire experience, its legacy, and arguably the entire game. I love Mass Effect. I love talking about Mass Effect, but someone please tell me why we're constantly made as video game players and enjoyers to reconcile our love for the creative aspects of a project when they're hijacked by the shitbags at the top. This could not be a worse look, aside from pitting players into teams like genophage versus no genophage and letting those outcomes over months decide which outcome was canon. It's just humiliating. War is hell. I don't know if I can ever go back. Victory is paid for in blood. Stay frosty, or you'll end up dead. How many vague war cliches can I fit in here? The party always ends, sometimes partway through the party, even. You get tired, or too drunk, your stomach hurts, nobody wants to talk about anything interesting anyway, and while we might remember a party fondly, our moments are always ending. Mass Effect 3 was grim, miserable really, and it's not hard to see why. It was the culmination of a generational quest against galactic extinction, juggling so many lives, so many threads, it could never truly stick the landing, not shot out quick as it was, not changing as much as it did. Corporate cash cows get squeezed, and that's just business. Mass Effect 3 is something I once loved, but realize now it was just another set of dying moments, groaning under the weight of expectation.
Engineered by Cerberus?
Wait, why did they yassify Ashley? The game doesn't play with the premise. If 2 was a chance to shake things up, 3 is pure formality. We knew the Reapers were coming, we knew the trilogy only had one open slot. Reapers attacked the Earth, and most of the Milky Way galaxy on that note, snuffing out countless lives and choking the remaining resistance.
On your feet, soldier! We are leaving!
We failed to save a little kid on our way off-world, and that whole set of visuals became the identity of the game. Scraping at the rim of deep and serious film, but hopelessly undercut by its own utter melodrama, juxtaposed by the waffle-a-mow late-aughts, early 2010s Cork-Chungus Bioware characters.
A very precise Mass Effect. Wire? I can try, but I doubt I have the fine control necessary.
Oh my god. That's so quirky!
It is so profoundly difficult to take this incredibly sad moment seriously. Look, the baby deer is helplessly trapped as the evil squid kaiju are blowing him up! This is a series where we ruthlessly sent a relatively regular guy flailing to the curb below, in a game where Rex's biggest issues are overcoming his species' Solarian-inflicted impotency and also, somehow, having too much sex. That spirit of play is alive and well in the reaches of Mass Effect 3's universe, but it presents so depressing and so grim. Paints every scene so black and gray, comparatively, it's almost comical. I think it's narratively appropriate. The universe is facing existential annihilation, so everything's grim and everyone's muttering about it. And yet, everything about the base game resists the joy that is Mass Effect, so when joy does poke in, it feels unnatural. Ultimately, it's hard to complain about. The fact is, Mass Effect was always a dark series, especially considering its in-universe political realities, and suddenly all of those have to be litigated, get dredged up at Thanksgiving dinner. You get to watch NPCs talk about ethnic cleansing, genocide, and the value of synthetic life. The elusive veneer of a fun space romp dissipates in an instant. Mass Effect was always politics. Mass Effect was always serious business.
9/11 was bad.
Primarch Fedorian is dead. His shuttle was shot down an hour ago as it tried to leave the moon.
9/11.
Consider yourself reinstated.
9.
Commander.
11.
It's hard to stomach. The sheer oorah militarism of 3 and 2 before it, but especially here, sours the initial vision of a mysterious spacefaring adventure. This really is the final frontier. Recognizable, overtly human, it's nothing alien at all. It's stock, it's predictable. Genuinely, where is the alien, the sense of wonderment in this vision of the galaxy? Paradoxically, it's the familiar that ends up carrying the experience, the characters that developed over entries, the faces you've known. It had a disappointingly small launch roster with a maximum of 7 before the sole DLC character. The series was huge. but the universe was getting smaller. As a consequence, the total number of missions shrunk massively, but each one grew longer to compensate. Mass Effect 3 was a mechanically fresh and lively experience, limited as it was by Bioware's own framework and engine, but combat dominated the runtime, and missions turned into slugs. Mass Effect 2 may not have the mechanical rapidity, the raw swiftness of the third game, but you could wrap up just about any quest in a brisk 30 minutes. There was a lot to do, but it never dragged on for very long or overstated its own importance. But these missions are important. They're of galactic relevance, suddenly. We've gone from the micro to the macro very quickly. As a narrative mechanics guy, Mass Effect 3 is artistically smart for aligning its clear narrative goals in its gameplay. It's the conclusion to a galactic war story. Big surprise, the energy starts to sag, and those missions needed weight. A handful of them determine the fate of entire races of people. They demand the extra time, but like with everything in Mass Effect 3, the joy is slowly sucked out of the experience like a very depressing balloon until the infamous conclusion. Maybe people think I'm exaggerating about 2 being a AAA-ification, but my guy, in case they didn't already say it loud enough, ME3 has full-on turret segments. You know, that special kind of gameplay shakeup that every major AAA title needs. It ain't AAA if it ain't got turrets. Get in the turret, hold the trigger to shoot, aim at enemies. We have incredible contempt for our own gameplay mechanic. Oh, a flamethrower segment? Sorry, Chief. Flamethrower segments is turret segments. Even space exploration, slowly peeled back as it is game over game, turns tense and occasionally dangerous in the third game. Suddenly, Reapers will locate and attack the Normandy if the player scans surrounding planets, and you'll be forced to escape or die outright. You have to juggle fuel consumption doing this, and it turns this once meditative process stressful. There is value in all of this, for as grim a picture as it appears. This is why I said Mass Effect can't simply be considered a handful of solo entries and should be treated as a trilogy in sum. We watch space, the Milky Way galaxy, change as we play. Regardless of which game has the most fun X, Y, or Z, we see the world evolving as we engage with it, as the story unfolds, and that makes Mass Effect feel more alive than most series in existence, and all contained within that one generation. I don't want to bog down this retrospective any more than I already am by highlighting all of the less story flaws across the series. For the most part, to most players, they don't matter. People saw the value, as stony and uncharismatic as it may initially appear to, say, me from 12 years ago, the moment they found something to latch onto. At some point, you're just in for the ride. The fact is, Mass Effect was directly challenged by internal development struggles and publication goals. The game's lead writer changed in the second entry on. People quite literally left Bioware because of changes made to 2 from people higher up the payroll. So much text goes into Mass Effect, even the original Mass Effect, that different individuals handling each planet worked in tandem to make Mass Effect 1's story happen at all. The games represent some of the highest recorded budgets in the AAA sphere at time of production, and while it's more comfortable to level critique at that kind of operation, it also serves to highlight the pressure the devs were under. Mass Effect's story is inherently resisted by its own development restraints, by how capital intersected with the art. Pointing out how a story could improve is actually pretty easy. As someone who's made that kind of criticism before, I don't really want to anymore. It's kind of like junk food. It's good and fun for a laugh, but at some point you find out things get cut during production, publishers rewrite the writer's work, writing is often a collaborative process, these people are paid by the hour. It's just not the same as critiquing a novel. You know, Mass Effect, like as a series, gets accused of Bush-era conservatism very frequently, and I think that's a little bit uncharitable and a bit of a meme. Aesthetically, that may be true for ME3, and if anything, Mass Effect 1 and parts of 3 make the strongest case for, big government evil. But a lot of what Mass Effect is player-directed. The games are so utterly reflexive to player choice. So many of the game's decisions actually do lean overwhelmingly empathetic by design. The fact is you get more points at the war asset table for doing Paragon things, generally speaking, than for doing Renegade things. Uniting people is the key premise of that game. I think Mass Effect is kind of beautiful, especially in the medium, for allowing the level of co-authorship it does with the player. And especially given the fairly wide writing staff, I don't think the series as a whole is making express political statements all the time. Just how its own writing is challenged by its cast of co-writers working under a tight schedule, no one person had full control over the script. Nobody took to the pedestal. Games being political shouldn't be scary. We're old enough to vote. We're old enough to be conscientious citizens, and boy, it must be nice to think it doesn't affect you personally or anybody you know. Mass Effect presents its own internal political reality you can choose to engage with, choose to actively parse or ignore to your own discredit. Without acknowledging them, Rex and the Krogans don't matter. The Quarians and the Geth don't matter. The Batarians are just mindless goons. The entire Spectre status thing contextualizing Shepard as a hero evaporates. And that sucks because it does tell a good political story, but what people latch onto is that Garrus can totally shoot a guy, and you can, punch a reporter out, and that's taken as a joke. The roster stuck out at first glance, almost entirely familiar faces, and you'd expect that to an extent. Most of the roster consists of original Normandy crew members. Who else would you be finishing the quest you started with? But it needed to be counterbalanced with newcomers in case the player lost too many potential squad mates in the suicide mission. And during Vermeer, EDI stands out as a fake newcomer. She was stuck as the ship's AI in the second game, but gets a body in 3. A body that almost kills a handful of your crew, who they then allow EDI to occupy. No PTSD question, no anything. That robot assassin is EDI now. Incredible work, guys. James Vega is the notorious newcomer to Mass Effect character, the guy who'll ask you every annoying question fans already know in case you picked up Mass Effect 3 because you heard it at a multiplayer mode. He presents as a COD bro douche, and I have no idea why this person is gumming up my character slots. Because I didn't read the comic series, there you go. Where he is a human who makes decisions. Alright. Fine. Vega works as a lil bro figure, purely by age and experience difference. Before joining the Normandy, he's put in a position Shepard's found himself in a million times. The short version is he has to let a colony die to protect something critically important, only for Shepard's actions to render his decision irrelevant, thereby letting people die for no reason. And that resentment bleeds into his career, colors his relationship with Shepard. It's really easy to handwave people, characters you don't immediately jive with, but if you take a look into their backstories, it's almost always easier to understand the vision. People are complex, and we have to imagine them complexly, including James goddamn Vega of all people. Liara's back from shadow broking. Garrus needs help defending his people against the Reapers before joining back up, and Tally's in the same boat. Kaidan or Ashley are only optionally recruited after a plot beat. It's Javik who's really interesting. Mass Effect teased the Protheans since the very first game, and so, when they decided to add a time-capsuled Prothean to the game for the low, low price of a beer, wait, 10 USD? EA, please. Well, I mean, we need something spicy in this cast, let's be real. Javik is a thorny, militant asshole. He was basically the Commander Shepard of his era and defers to your judgment even when he disagrees, but has so many insults saved up for everybody, it's incredible. It's particularly funny watching Liara, who spent her life studying the Protheans, finally meet one and find out he's a prick and remembers your race when they were primitive.
To discover the most primitive races of my time now rule the galaxy. The Asari, the humans, the Turians.
There's also the Solarians.
The lizard people evolved.
I believe they're amphibian.
They used to eat flies.
Mass Effect 2 revealed the fate of the Protheans, but honestly, top-tier trolling pulling one out of the ground and making him a jackass. It's not for nothing. Javik knows the score and watched everything he loved die while he helplessly had to admit defeat. He knows he might be waking up only to die. I appreciate that creative choice. Your cool new alien friend isn't here to pat your ass and tell you how good you did on today's assignment, okay? He wants blood. Reaper blood. Let's get this blood! ME3's gameplay might come as a shock to players just coming off the preceding titles. There's no sugarcoating it. Game moves fast, or at least Shepard does. While 2 was fairly plotting, and 1, you could barely schmoove in that game, man. Come on. Shepard can rip through the field here, with all the handling of a grocery cart. It's a weird experience from a mechanical perspective. While 2 felt very intentionally kneecapped, flowing but deliberate like a controlled river set to a pounding bass line, 3 can get chaotic. dashing and the ability to dodge roll are obvious pushes to juice the combat, okay? Get some nitrous flowing. But the system itself is still somewhat hobbled. Enemies still meander around like big weird babies. The way they path towards you and how they track your model when they swing in betrays the primitive nature of the engine. It feels loose and stiff at the same time, and I don't think it's an issue necessarily. It's still got that thuming kind of rhythm that characterizes Mass Effect in general. Once you graduate off automatic weapons and start slapping down fat melee attacks and magnum rounds, God, that feels good. But it's definitely an old car with a fresh coat of paint. The flare's nice, but this thing's still chugging. Mass Effect 3 also feels spammier in general. The second game did this too, but you're very incentivized to strike enemies with specific moves, like weak biotic attacks or tech moves, priming those enemies for detonation with a follow-up attack. The player can turn into a combo factory themselves. I rolled pure biotic and went around using Rend and following it up with Shockwave and others to set off enormous explosions that dealt with crowds and burned down health bars. The game has ammo crates scattered throughout, which can matter, but their main use is refilling grenades, which, unlike other abilities, aren't hobbled by a cooldown and can be chained together, meaning you can prime an enemy, then detonate them multiple times in succession while the debuff is active. The game doesn't move entirely away from hallways, but opens up into battlefields a lot. These rooms are just Gears of War. Combat rooms become kill rooms, and on reflection, this is probably another thing old Mass Effect fans didn't like, the way their fairly low-key games slowly turned into all-out third-person shooter firefights. Like, this stuff is math. You usually fight progressively stronger groups until you take down a big dude just like the multiplayer, but then, narratively, Mass Effect 3 is the beginning and end of a war. It would only make sense for the game to prioritize combat that mirrors the game's events. When it comes to fandom, you have to be prepared for 1,000 little deaths. In this case, you don't win a war without a few casualties, systems included. Every class was given a unique melee attack as well. Anyone can pistol whip, but when you hold the button and drop that fat biotic haymaker, that electric omniblade, man, they understood the assignment. For a very long time, Mass Effect didn't look gamey, as it were. It didn't have some flashy visual signature the way Kratos has his fiery chain blades and, I don't know, Kirby has his really big mouth. Aside from lens flares, Mass Effect loves lens flares. They're everywhere, in every game. People complained about the lens flares in the Legendary Edition because they were too strong, apparently. Legion is a walking lens flare. Problem with lens flares, though, right, is you can't pick one up like a sword and bap someone on the head. Games are best when they recognize the medium they're in and play to those strengths. Mass Effect looked pretty cable television for a very long time, and I think the Omniblade ties it up with a bow. They put it on the box. When in doubt, transparent sword. You're welcome. ME3's big new system is the War Asset Table, the reduced to numbers version of the people you've befriended, the people you've helped, and most importantly, the people you've kept alive. The system was pretty frustrating to engage with on release. You had to really dig into the game's world, completing side objectives and generally sinking time to top it off enough to greenlight the ending selections you wanted. That's right, Mass Effect said play the game or have no real control over the ending. On one hand, it's brilliant. It course corrects away from the renegade path conceptually, the careless lone wolfitude, by implying that Shepard should and must act as a unifying force if he wants the best possible future for the most people. And you can get a less narratively fulfilling ending by putting less effort in. It makes sense. The War Asset Table also intersected, originally, with the multiplayer mode, letting players contribute by squatting up online, which is altered in the Legendary Edition because multiplayer is gone. In one way, the system isn't particularly fun. Mass Effect is arguably best when simply ran through, trying not to read too deeply because if you do, you'll realize the plot is riddled with more holes than Swiss cheese, even down to the minutiae, even down to the mechanics. Mass Effect is a series where practically infinite ammo exists because of how guns work, so the first game has no ammo. And mysteriously, in 2 and 3, ammo comes from dropped clips and crates. They justified the change in lore, but the reality involves publisher meddling and mechanics more thoroughly matching mass market expectations of cover shooters. Mass Effect was always thoroughly committed to the product half of its art. If you read too deeply, you realize the game was very obviously not planned out from the start, and experiencing it fast and free will punish players directly. It encouraged the type of overtuned, incisive critic and forum poster who dominates discussion about these games by demanding investiture. That's why Mass Effect 3 was so heartbreaking ultimately. It felt like it was leading somewhere amazing, but ended up being kind of annoying to interface with and funneling down to a handful of conclusions you had to work your ass off for. If you've gotten this far and you're not a fan of Mass Effect and you want to understand why people like Mass Effect so much, and I've said it before, but Mass Effect is a series, a trilogy, that you help write. So I'm going to talk about my boy Conrad Werner for a minute. Conrad Werner is this annoying, obnoxious, parasocial idiot you meet possibly only once in the first game. And the trick is, depending on your reaction to him and his weirdness, he can run off and get himself killed in all 3 games. And comedically too, hitting a bunch of cars before getting sucked into a wind turbine or whatever. And the thing is, you don't care because Conrad kinda sucks. Except if you try to humor him and try to invest in the games, managing to acquire side objectives to greenlight a single moment in 3, Conrad ends up being helpful for the construction of the weapon because he wrote a dissertation on similar material and worked with famous scientists in the universe, and he was putting his life into helping kids and trying to live up to your example because you inspired him. And if you don't care, he dies. And if you do care, Mass Effect lets you see the galaxy the way it could be, in spite of the way that it is, if only anyone cared, or tried. And you got the chance to write that reality for yourself, or lose it. Yeah, they dropped the ball on various plot threads, but they didn't drop the ball on Conrad Werner. And I think that says something about the series. But how does the game get here? It's helpful to look at Mass Effect 3 not as 3 color-coded choices, but as an ending from start to finish. Major plot threads reach their climax, the genophage is dealt with, Jack's arc is dealt with, the synthetic life thing is dealt with, and multiple DLCs were released after launch to better round out the narrative. After Earth falls, you're off to Mars, where you discover schematics for a Prothean superweapon to wipe out the Reapers. This is how EDI gets a body, taking down a Cerberus bot. The weapon's development begins, and we head off to broker peace amidst the crumbling galactic political situation. You want to help the Turians, but they won't help unless you get the Krogans to help the Turians, which means curing the genophage, which means deriving a cure from the one fertile female Krogan, defending her from Cerberus goons, and working with Mordin, or another replacement character if he died, to get the thing disseminated, choosing to sabotage the eventual cure for the Solarians.
Oh crap. Get back!
Or throw caution to the wind for the sake of compassion. A lot of Mass Effect is wrapped up in this scenario, the way the various species must work together to survive, but how they've backstabbed and hamstrung each other into positions where they won't or can't. It's true to real life. Conflict, war, isn't the fault of people simply behaving badly, but having genuine interests, expansionist goals, or the aim to consolidate power, secure resources, and dominance. And getting directly involved in the situation is fascinating. It's one of the more real depictions of human conflict in a video game. I personally think the story, grim or not, holes or not, is engaging and reflective, pulls the mirror up to the player and forces them to look. Of course, Shepard knows the one guy who can cure the genophage, so we do. It's one of the most brutal moments in the series. You can opt to sabotage the cure and lie about the Krogan being cured, but Shepard is racked by obvious guilt every time, and I like that a lot. Having the balls to pull off quiet ethnic cleansing while smiling through it all, especially considering Rex, your longtime friend, believes in you, has to come with consequences. But then the plot pivots to Kai Lang. I always hated Kai Lang, just for blowing in, ruining everything, even beating Shepard at one point, only to get stuffed while the game puffs the guy up like, ooh shit at Kai Lang, the baddest edge boy among the stars. He can kill Commander Shepard and doesn't afraid of anything. But I realized the guy exists to remind the player that Cerberus and the elusive man were bad news, that Shepard ultimately shouldn't have sided with them in 2, even if the game forced it, and progress means consequences. It's good for drama anyway. You're trying to save the galaxy, and a rich megalomaniacal jackass is trying to have you killed. Sounds great, and it leads to some incredible action sequences like this scene with Thane. You're eventually forced into conflict with Ashley or Caden, who are working alongside Udina and the Council, and barely manage to defuse the situation, and often, depending on your choices, spilling some blood. It's frustrating that we find ourselves asking for trust so often, but admittedly, Shepard does plenty of suspect things, even more so if you're on the Renegade route. The game makes a point of saying very early, in the first game actually, that the Council races look at humans as bullies, so it's not surprising when the highly volatile and action-first Shepard keeps catching side-eye. And again, many of these scenarios can play out in vastly different ways depending on your choices, superficially through the Paragon-Renegade disparity, but also through your base choices in Mass Effect 1. Before long, you're off to Rannoch, the Quarian homeworld, to liberate it from the Geth in exchange for some assistance. This scene is also brutal, right up there with the Genophage, so one man, Commander Shepard, has the option to negotiate a ceasefire, a temporary peace for the purpose of mutual survival between the Geth and the Quarians. You might say, well, the Geth are robots, but this is not exactly accurate. They're synthetic beings, sure, they were created, but all the way back in Mass Effect 1, Tali makes it pretty clear that the Quarian-created Geth started asking if they had souls, implying they were sentient or sapient, which is when the Quarians attacked unprovoked, why the Quarians are specifically suspicious of AI like EDI. So when 3 rolls around, when you're ferried through the digital hall of Geth oppression at the hands of the Quarians, the Geth become a lot more sympathetic, to say nothing of Legion's monologues throughout too. The only thing making the Quarians not look outwardly and demonstrably evil is the Geth were probably never intended to reach sentience, but the Quarians' machines were too good, and when they fired first, some percentage of the Geth fell under sway of the Reapers, making them easily perceivable as a mindless drone killbot army. Also, Shepard is the first to come into contact with a seemingly sentient Geth, regardless of any "does this unit have a soul?" business. No one Geth approached the Quarians as a person at any point. Their personhood has always been in question until ME2. Legion does a ton to litigate the realities of the Geth in 2 and again in 3 here. And the fault ultimately lies with the Quarians, who created the conditions for an intractable conflict, and the Reapers for further galvanizing it when the Geth merely sought self-preservation. Legion intends to sacrifice himself to upload Reaper code to Geth that would actually free them from Reaper influence, I guess, and become capable of true sapience, true sentience, free will, a genuinely monumental move. So, you can have one of the species entirely wiped out, or broker a temporary peace. Peace makes sense. The galaxy is more important than this conflict. Punishing the Geth or the Quarians collectively for the mistakes of some percentage of their respective populi feels evil. I mean, this scene is basically the central question of Mass Effect. Since this question ties directly into the ending, I guess I'll save litigation until the end. Shepard heads to the Asari homeworld, which is already compromised. Turns out the Asari were hiding a Prothean relic that may in fact be the catalyst necessary for the Crucible's completion, so we go, get beaten by Kai Lang even though my DPS is significantly higher, I call BS, and man, for a race that strives for biological diversity by mating outside of its race, you could at least have entrusted this knowledge to somebody else at literally any point, guys. Give me a break. This is such a Mass Effect moment. To be the Paragon is like bold defiance of the status quo, in a sense, acting on faith and trust in everyone else, because the universe doesn't work like that. Like, people don't work like that. People mistrust first every time, and they're not even wrong to do so. We've all been taught this lesson before, but it really highlights how impossible peace is, just as a concept. So, you take the fight to Cerberus, root them out, and eventually take out Lang. I gotta play this. This is gold.
That was for Thane and Miranda, you son of a bitch.
Kai Lang was obnoxious, but he served a purpose, leading us to more of the Elusive Man's documents. Once again, everything comes back to the Citadel. It's not just a big ol' warp gate for the Reapers a la ME1, it's also the catalyst, apparently, what we've been looking for the entire time. Great! The game goes full ooh-rah. We battle the Reapers on Earth, teleport on up to the Citadel, and face down the Elusive Man. You've seen or heard about Mass Effect 3's apparently disastrous ending, and the criticism isn't completely flaccid. I was also taken aback in the moment years ago, how abrupt it all is. It's just that the criticism is mostly laser-focused on about 20 minutes of the game's runtime, doesn't account for the full game. And in case the criticism does actually tackle the full game, runs into the weird online discourse burn pile problem film where everybody puts on their thinking caps and does their best CinemaSins impression while generally calling the writers idiots, once again not acknowledging what games writing is actually like to perform, what it means to be in that sphere, the challenges facing it. The genophage is partly why the ending is hated, even if it's honestly pretty benign. The game chooses to dodge the question of whether preventing ethnic cleansing was helpful for the galaxy or not, just ignores the Krogan situation outright. I don't really need the game to line up with my choice. I know what I did was right regardless. Hard to call that a bad payoff. If I had one overarching critique for the general scenario of Mass Effect 3, it's how boring the thing is when reduced to its parts. Experiencing it, playing it in the moment, getting invested in the characters and dropping fat biotic shockwaves, it's hard to get cynical. If you resist the river's pull, if you peel back and look, it's stunning how banal the series really is. Mass Effect is a reskinned KOTOR in one sense, and a really stock action cop flick in another. Per the KOTOR comparison, if you played that game, you've played Mass Effect. And the real surprise is the leaps in graphical fidelity and all the particular framing, the lighting, the details used to make the thing much more cinematic than it should reasonably be. It has heavy moral conundrums that are fun to parse and talk about. It conceals its stilted animations by having characters talk and talk, exaggerates and dramatizes with zooms and angles more than actually having the puppets move convincingly. The voice performances lend so much weight to characters so profoundly uncharismatic at a glance. Most of the aliens, and humanoids too, but ignore that, have notably stiff facial movements because animation is expensive, but this mysteriously works to elevate the alienness of these species, makes the Krogan less approachable because they always look like they're weird grumbling stones. Solarians seem terse and tense, and basically are. Physically are. Turians barely have to emote because you're too busy being distracted by their gross mandibles. Mass Effect is built not with toothpicks and glue, but sheet metal cutouts and 1,000 clever tricks. The scenario itself has been done. Maybe not exactly, but the pieces on the board are ancient. Local government agent pulls his gun on every civilian who gets in his way, turning over every stone, uprooting every criminal organization, kicking ass, taking names, and nobody's gonna tell bro what to do because he's a professional. He's got a cause, rebel or not. A lot of the series is written pretty flatly in that way. It's not particularly imaginative and it's not particularly fresh. What it is comforting, familiar, and dramatic. Most players get swept up by the intrigue. They're already cued into this kind of storytelling thanks to TV and film. Only now, thanks to the video game medium, you can press a button to comfort a struggling character or whip out your pistol and fire first. Mass Effect isn't brilliant at its core, it's where it's located, where it sprouts from, that makes it genius. Bioware managed to render that show you watch during dinner as a video game and let you influence the outcome, all on one console gen. It's a truly once-in-a-lifetime series. And I need you to know this because I also think the series manages to duck a lot of otherwise very valid criticism with that veil. Mass Effect's worlds, practically the whole of the Milky Way galaxy, is not meaningfully alien, but palpably human. Almost everybody speaks English outright, not a real criticism. It's a necessary abstraction for the play experience, but it goes much deeper. The characters are almost all humanoid because they needed to maintain like animations across species to save on animation fees, which is why it took till DLC of ME3 to get a Volus onto a battlefield, properly animated. Every major race is practically human. Asari aren't, but physically appear like the race of the Beholder, making them corporeally human throughout the games because we only ever take on a human perspective. The Turians are militant and rigid, but no more so than other disciplinarian fictional groups of people. They literally have Latin names to pull on this cultural understanding. Solarians talk fast and make better operatives. Awesome. All of these people still know what to do in a standoff. Almost every interaction is founded in recognizable human social norms. Very little behavior outside of human social norms is treated as acceptable, and the races that can't act in desirable ways are treated as undesirable. The Vorcha come to mind. The series, as a product made by humans under those creative and monetary restraints, necessarily cannot escape the profound humanity underpinning all of its alien propositions. It's incredibly familiar at every turn. The nightclubs are just nightclubs, man. The gambling is just gambling. On the very rare occasion you experience something a little out there, a little quirky, but it's just not what Mass Effect is. It's hard to genuinely call this a disappointment. I don't know if the game would be half as fun otherwise. So much of it lulls the player into the stream and carries them along, and friction might elevate it to an artsy space but never meaningfully connect. It's just incredible how truly small this galaxy really is. And this is why the political reality of Mass Effect is so interesting to me. It's an important backdrop to 1, it's almost entirely sidelined for 2, and it's very, very loud in 3. And if the game is so profoundly human, so utterly incapable of being alien, then of course the galactic statecraft is going to be interesting. It's what makes Mass Effect cool. You can learn about disparate people and empathize with others. You can influence the world or not and find out what that means. I mean, in truth, politics are relatively alien for most people anyway. Gamers hate them. But because of that, they're more than alien enough to drape over a relatively human contraption and call it mysterious. It's fascinating. Part of me wants to write a long-winded diatribe about the endings. I remember playing ME3 late, and after running them back-to-back, tired and annoyed through the ending sequence, only to find out the catalyst, the thing we needed, was some kind of magical manifestation. This time it's a child, and he deferred to us to change the fate of the universe because we were the one man who could change the destiny, only to be limited to an ending I didn't want and didn't apparently work hard enough to get. Thinking, wow, this really blows. 3 games, piles of choices, character deaths for a vague, maybe the galaxy will pan out better in the future. No word on the Krogan genophage, the Quarian Geth conflict, a fresh, clean slate, so nobody has to ask any questions except what the f*** did I bother for? Seriously, it stung then, and it stings now, but it is an ending. And you choose whether to seize control of the Reapers, obliterate the Reapers, or synthesize with the synthetics. Get them the f*** out of the Milky Way, basically. Become the Christ allegory the writer maybe thinks you sort of might be. But all of these endings funnel down to the same thing. Fresh slate. Just like if the Reapers had succeeded, only this time they won't be back. And more people live. Good. Fair enough. It is worth noting that the Renegade Paragon path is important to the endings. Most of these focus on one of the game's central questions: what is the worth of synthetic life? It's why you're tasked to obliterate, control, or directly synthesize with them. Renegade Shepard does not consider the Geth individuals. Paragon Shepard does. It's just how he acts when you make those choices in the plot. So the game presents a statement on the validity of synthetic life. That's great. I think that's why the ending can feel flat. Players want the totality of their choices, characters, planets, etc., panning out in a big ending cutscene showing where they all ended up, when the ending is simply going for the game's central thrust. And you had to have been paying attention to understand that. Even as an old person playing these games again, I struggled with the synthetic life as true personhood concept. It's hard to wrap your mind around, especially for people who are religious. That a synthetic existence, especially a man-created existence, something that could be seen as profane to some subset of people, is to be valued equally to any other person on the planet. And it calls for such a strong amount of empathy from any individual player. It's why I continually rebuff the idea that the games are, at their core, deeply conservative or whatever, or like distastefully conservative. You know, the guy who wrote the Codex, L'Etoile here, in this post, makes it very clear that the dev staff, the writer's staff, thought that it was understood that it was racist to be against AI as people, which is fascinating. I genuinely think the writers went out of their way, even when they left between entries, to tell a story about people coming together, accepting themselves as they are, and treating them decently. Mass Effect is ultimately about the best of humanity, and it allows learners, people who don't really understand that level of empathy yet, to sit at the table. Mass Effect kinda owns. And really, it's a fitting conclusory problem for a Bioware game. It's practically the central thrust of the Bioware experience. You can treat all these other digital personalities like people. Why not the Geth? You know, I keep learning about game dev and understand these people were probably crunching like mad to get the thing out in a brisk 2 years. Trying to wrap this much in one go? Good luck. So some things fall away. They actually released a downloadable extended cut for the ending, doing exactly what I described, showing off for as little money as possible, by the way, every relevant group of people we met. It reminds the player where they came from, who got them there. They tried shoring it up with DLC, the Leviathan DLC, where you go underwater and discover the creator of the Reapers, attempts to contextualize the Reapers' actions not as genocidal but preservationalist, and many players never got to engage with that context. Mass Effect 3 has plenty of DLC, but the one that deserves special mention is the Citadel campaign, a fairly short romp through a hyper-flashy, stylized, colorized Citadel underbelly. You have to remember, the game came out, got a mountain of feedback, and that all got shuffled off to the devs. So I imagine Citadel was a response to that. Mass Effect 3 is dim, grimy, and sad. Citadel is the total tonal opposite. Bright, fresh, and fun. It starts rough. Shepard's life endangered by mercs, but you're quickly swept into the flow, popping shots off under the neon glow of the city, teaming up with your best pals, even people who didn't make it to the main roster. The tone creates some tension. It's deeply unserious. The bad guy is a clone of you, Commander Shepard, whose diabolical plan involves confining the crew of the Normandy to a safe deposit vault of some kind and taking over your identity. And honestly, this is so goddamn stupid, but so funny. I mean, who else was gonna square off with Shepard? He already killed half the galaxy. He's a monster. Of course it had to be you. Someone else might have gotten it wrong. It grates in that exact Quirk Chungus way I mentioned before. Rex is simply not himself. The guy's out here screaming, "Uncle Erdnot's got something for ya," and having a ton of sex. Maybe that's why his mood is so improved. I don't know. It's just so jarring. Played in the middle of the third game like I did. It came from outer space, this DLC. Maybe the real alien elements were the Citadel DLCs we played along the way. But you realize when you're talking it out and screwing around at your house party that this is probably what fans wanted from Mass Effect 3 in the first place. They wanted to celebrate and party, hang out with all their digital friends who got them through whatever bullshit life threw at them during those years the games were released. It feels like a course correction, an apology for what the series felt it had to become to complete itself, a recognition of the fun it promised and arguably failed to deliver on. And even then, it was locked behind that sweet, sweet DLC paywall. It's why I have to look at the thing critically instead of just filleting. Mass Effect 3 was one of the most efficient money factories to come out of a AAA studio, a game that didn't simply receive, quote, support, but rather strategic additions to hijack players' wallets and recur development costs. Oh, you want Reaper context? $5.99. You want to party with your friends? $5.99. Couple more of these and the CEO will have his 7th yacht. If you have any kind of capital critique, you have to acknowledge that. It's hard to square away as just like a joyful little romp or whatever. You have to assume cynicism and hope the thing proves otherwise. I think sitting there, right there on the couch with all your friends, is worth more than any vanilla Mass Effect 3 ending ever was. It's fun to joke like, the real Mass Effect was the friends we made along the way, but truly, I know the good guys win. I've seen this show before. Let me just sit here a moment with the people who helped make it happen. And I will say the Citadel DLC delivers resoundingly on Mass Effect 1's core selling point. Its Star Trek nature, its schlocky, made-for-TV character. Of course we're supposed to be getting in stupid shootouts with hokey clones of ourselves. It's what all this is founded on, man. It was incredibly easy to dunk on Mass Effect Andromeda on release, and in a good few ways it still is. Where you choose to stand on it is a pretty clear barometer of your priorities when it comes to engaging with the medium. In one corner sit the dunksters, who know the game was trash on launch and haven't really concerned themselves with it since. There's the optimists, tracing beautiful little lines of ink in appreciation for what the title tried, maybe a little clumsily, to do. There's the principled AAA haters who have every right to stand in solidarity with every strip-mined studio, every vaporized employee, and will simply not engage. And then there's me, floating through space with no ending in sight. Mass Effect is such a frustrating series to comment on because I have a genuine love for the play experience, a sincere appreciation for the unique value it represents, and still find huge swaths of the thing somewhere between gauche and reprehensible. The fact is, Andromeda is a fine game to play today. Gun shoot real good-like. It's saddled in a more frenetic action framework that feels mechanically free and modern to match the new era vibe, and the characters, even when derivative and tired, are still a solid argument for the thing's existence. Bioware is still under all that rubble, somewhere, and even with the mountains of bad press, the cringe, the jank, some good shines through. Deep KBash lore. I made a powerful, and moving Mass Effect Andromeda multiplayer mode rap video when I had fewer than 500 subscribers, nearly 7.5 years ago. I bought into that anti-Andromeda press cycle because hating things was fun. Being cynical and mean-spirited was fun. As you might suspect, I was miserable at that time, cynical and tired. Things have changed over the past few years, life got better, and maybe unsurprisingly, you find it's really easy to dislike everything in general when you're unhappy, and much easier to give things a fair shake when you're well-rested, well-fed, and doing okay, all things considered. But you better believe I'm on edge after ME3's predatory monetization and the general lapse in story quality since the start. I don't dunk a lot of things anymore, and when I do, I try to keep the developers in mind, how they were impacted by the publishers, and what I was realistically expecting from the experience. The original Mass Effect trilogy ended pretty definitively. Regardless of the future after Shepard's decision, his journey was over. He handled the Reapers, the Galaxy's people were set back technologically, and nobody had to seriously inquire into the Krogan question or the Geth question thereafter. I mean, I would do the same if I were in charge of a massively popular AAA video game franchise. Can you imagine what would happen if I didn't just wipe all my everything away with a comically large eraser? Family members would hound me at Christmas. Why'd you say all that stuff about ethnic cleansing in your video game? I was having a good time until the ethnic cleansing thing. Yo, Matt Walters better change his name to Neo because he dodged a storm of bullets with that move. Andromeda begins 600 years following the events of the trilogy. You don't play as a storied military veteran, but a practical newcomer to the galaxy. Ryder, a twin. Only one of you bonks your head. Now they're in a coma. Newcomer might not be a fair term. The twins were both Alliance soldiers, along with their father, Alec Ryder, who's spearheading the Andromeda Initiative as the Pathfinder, the guy who will find humanity a new home. He's armed with an AI and doesn't afraid of anything. So the last remaining Ryder imprints or implants or mind melds or whatevers with their late father's AI, and now they're the new Pathfinder regardless of claims of nepotism from friends and coworkers because shut up dweeb, I'm the Pathfinder now. The last time Mass Effect had a Nepo baby, they died. I can pray for a repeat performance. Nah, but I can equip a flamethrower and do colonialism. Space action adventure. Video game! Andromeda is significantly more fun to play around with than you've been told, and that's due to its extensive mechanical changes. Imagine the Mass Effect trilogy as a hallway, or a series of hallways that you can shoot through. Whether you're shooting guns, gravity magic, technology, or even yourself down those hallways, you're still very confined. It gives the player a physical tightness, a closure that characterizes the whole experience from 1 to 3 as considered, sort of tactical, approaching a real-time rhythmic chess in a sense as you approach, attack, duck, reload, fire, etc., unless you're on the highest difficulties and then it's menu spam. Andromeda blows that entire framework wide open. Hallways exist, but never enough to consistently characterize the play that way. You fight in huge open rooms with plenty of cover options. You can jump mid-firefight, you can dash mid-air, you can jump, dash, hover in place, and rain fire down on covered enemies. Ryder, not the coma one or the dead one, can teleport dash. This is horrifying. Imagine this right behind you. Andromeda is more complex and generally interesting to physically engage with. The battlefields feel like battlefields, not simple old-era kill rooms, and enemy design, while still fairly limited, definitely asks more of the player. I died more in Andromeda than the other games because the game is frankly more demanding. You've got to pay attention. You have incredibly powerful tools, but you can't just flit around like a maniac. You've got to mind your surroundings. Andromeda is hope, or it's supposed to be. Hope for what the galaxy can be, a new vision for play. But innovation takes failure, and they left the whole project, good bits, chaff and all, plain to see. Like the trilogy, the inciting incident is important. The Riders were already Alliance outcasts before the game begins. Alec was quite literally blacklisted for his AI research, and it led him to physically leave the galaxy he knew behind, kids in tow, for another life. There's a story in that, one that doesn't really get the spotlight to mature during the actual plot. Ryder, the one you play, is the child of a shamed military veteran, someone whose very name was tainted. Ryder gains the complete trust of every companion, every major character she interacts with, and while you're occasionally questioned, resisted, or challenged, the player always comes out on top. It feels like a missed opportunity for some much-needed texture. As a character, Ryder feels fairly flat. The hope, the optimism they exude is great, Tonally, narratively it's the right call, but even a pinch of meaningful doubt, the desire to escape a sullied legacy, would have added more to a relatively threadbare character. Shepard wasn't great, but as others have famously said, she got the job done. Shepard was a storied soldier regardless of player input and carried enough weight to draw comments from other characters. Their legacy preceded their actions, and the expectations thrust upon them created an interesting dynamic to, as previously said, live up to or undercut. Ryder has a lot riding on her shoulders too, but we already know she's gonna win. We already know she's got this. You can see it in her smile, you can hear it in her squad mates' words, you can see it the split second the villains show up, hostile and unreasonable as they are, and start blasting the meek, already troubled Andromeda initiative. But you can know the ending of a story and still find the value, so let's get the comb and start sifting. The world of Andromeda has been described as Dragon Age Inquisition, and there might be some truth to that comparison, but what's really interesting is the Mass Effect lineage leading up to these spaces. The original game is the only Mass Effect game with relatively unguided open areas the player can fly off to at a moment's notice. The following games are heavily restricted and arguably discourage freeform exploration because the quest design, and especially noticeably in 2, will lead you through every part of a zone without any intentional player input. Andromeda actively responds to the overtly AAA criticism of 2 and 3, moves away from the unabashedly linear nature of those games, and players call it open-world slop. And it is, but is that supposed to be a criticism? Did we play the same series? Has it not been about trendy prestige gaming since 2? The central thrust of my defense for any of Andromeda really is that these lines, the distasteful bits of Andromeda, can be traced back. 2 was needlessly AAA, 3 was the harbinger of the loot crate. Open-world gameplay in Mass Effect is not only part of the celebrated original's proposition, one it couldn't actually deliver on, but fully expected from a big-budget game circa 2017. I don't really care for open-world titles at a baseline, and linearity to me means focused gameplay experience, but this is such an intentional return to the series' roots, it's kind of crazy how instantaneously off-putting the game was to people. Isn't this what they wanted? Admittedly, the thing was cooked, or rather, uncooked, the minute it hit store shelves. Day 1 patches are nothing new to modern-day gamers, but Andromeda was rough. Broken animations, disgusting visuals, all kinds of bugs, and playing years later gives me the best chance to experience games. They're all there, more complete than ever, and so it's easier to see the good, hazy as it can be early on. The open worlds are still relatively barren. You find stuff, shoot stuff, and talk to people, usually to find side quests and shoot more stuff. It's more and somehow less directed than the original title's exploration. Landing on a new planet meant walking into whatever the devs specifically planned for that area, a sabotaged research facility, a terrorist plot, etc. Andromeda's open environments house their mainline quests as well, meaning each zone is a place you invest in, spend time with, complete. But that's also narratively important, central to the vision. The whole point of the Andromeda initiative is scouting out a new home for the human species and colonizing it. Not to be depressingly correct, but open-world environments that you invest in are the perfect gameplay expression for a story about scouting and colonizing. Linear hallways and cover shooting just wouldn't sell the vibe. And it's a different vibe, but that doesn't make it bad or wrong for Mass Effect. Now, for all that knob polishing, I actually like weighing ideas back and forth. I think thinking and talking about media is fun. I hope you do too. The Mako was Shepard's ride through the strange and hostile worlds he explored throughout the first game. A mechanical nightmare that bounded and stalled. The thing could fly, man, unintentionally or not. The Mako's quirks were sanded off with the Legendary Edition, and we get this weighty, precise, efficient land-roving vehicle not particularly equipped to handle the original game's planet design, but good enough to move from point A to point B eventually. Andromeda's new machine is cut from the same cloth as the Legendary Edition's Mako, an efficient, generally useful vehicle, and I think that for all of Andromeda's attempts to tell players, guys, this is still Mass Effect, it gives away the game a bit. Friction can define whole artistic experiences, and the Mako is a funny little piece of gaming history that laid bare the lovable jank that was Mass Effect 1. By the time the new thing I won't dignify with the name of rolls around, the design conceit is clear. This is a big-budget AAA open-world experience, and that quaint thing just ain't it anymore, sweet pea. The Dragon Age Inquisition comparison suddenly makes sense. Ah, right. Modern Bioware, draped with all that money, sure to sell you a really big experience instead of a simple video game-ass video game. Oh look, monetization features. Okay. I don't want to knock the core of Andromeda. I think the heart is there, and I think it accomplishes its basic narrative goals with its mechanics and level design. I also think it's openly and obviously cynical in its intentions, and while that isn't new for Bioware, or even new for this series, definitely not new for EA. You don't get to flippantly play with your artistic identity while sidling up to predatory monetization and trendy design and walk away criticism-free. I mean, let's not forget the game's DLC support, which was pulled instantaneously when sales figures rolled around, when the internet rage machine got going. Even if no projects were ever officially confirmed, it's the only major modern Bioware game without any. So I'm left here, sorting out the valuable from the corporate. Andromeda's characters are also solid all around. It's a Bioware staple. Simply write believable personalities with compelling problems and quirks to populate your rich universe. Not necessarily the most challenging thing in the world, but here, Andromeda fumbles in an important way. Korra is the head of an Asari commando unit, something mythologized about throughout the trilogy, so you know she's serious business. And, having worked directly under your father, she struggles with her place in the initiative, having been unfairly passed over by the AI for you, an acolyte, a noob. The relationship is tense, but she's always got your back and it's hard to meaningfully criticize. Mass Effect, Bioware, has always been good at creating challenging characters to brush up against. Liam hit the bench for most of my run, purely because I like focusing on the aliens, but also because he's arguably more boring. A generalist from a law enforcement, military, engineering, multidisciplinarian background. He's a good guy with good intentions and tries to broker peace with the Angarans, but he doesn't stick out as opposition, which tends to make the most memorable Mass Effect characters. Vetra's interesting for never entering into the rigidity of Turian upbringing, having spent most of her life off the home planet of Palaven and on the reaches of known space. She has a past that more or less went up in smoke due to her parents and eventually her own failings, so she left for a fresh start. Andromeda has the ability to create new identities for people you thought you had figured out, and that's one of its strengths, the way it bucks racial assumptions and characterizations with raw, individual stories. Everybody has one. Not everyone gets heard. PB is basically an inversion of Liara, someone who's hopelessly committed to understanding the Remnant, but also brash, outgoing, flirtatious, everything that Liara obviously wasn't. The flip is louder than intended. She's nowhere approaching a bad character, but it's easy to feel those creative intentions blur the genuine concept under all the gloss. But she's fun and carries the energy the game is going for. We're out here in the field, fighting for our meals, and brother, we ain't got room for negative Nancys. Like her demented ex, who will hound you throughout her loyalty mission. This is the real issue with Andromeda. In jettisoning the past and establishing the new, the game feels wholly tied to its foundation, but will not create characters with the weight of the originals. Liara was the daughter of an Asari matriarch. PB's just PB. I appreciate that lower key characterization, but really, what do fans have to look forward to now? Where are the intractable conflicts? Serve your drama with stakes. Drac is an old salt, a Krogan warrior who kicks ass and tags along because, hey, you helped them out, and it's Krogan, that's everything. Drac's about what you expect from the species' previous appearances, but he's also made to reconcile with his nerdy loser grandson, which is almost funny, and at least takes the time to characterize the Krogan as people, not just the perfect caricature of a warrior race. They have people who don't fit into their traditions and have to navigate their lives regardless. Jal is initially distrustful of humanity and ends up acting as a representative of the Angaran race on the crew, meeting out some of the ensuing drama and generally having your back. Jal is actually pretty well written, being one of the few characters who actually bumps up against your actions, calls you out. If you fail to bring him along on an early mission, he'll get pouty like, looks like they don't require my help. He's insecure about the crew, he's sweet, he tries to make them little gifts. The reason people liked ME2, aside from all the dick-punching aggression, was the focus on the micro, magnifying into the lives lived in the galaxy. And that's what Andromeda tries to do. If it weren't in charge of so much, so quickly, it might have actually struck a chord with players. All these characters are great, or at least not overtly worse than the previous games. If anything, there's less grit amongst the cast, tapping into the Quirk Chungus vibe the Citadel DLC was giving off. Drax's dorky grandson he has to learn to appreciate. Vetra's gift of steak to the human player. Burnt, but she tried. Editor me here, I should not have put that much snark on the Vetra steak thing. That's actually very sweet. We appreciate Vetra. A bit. We appreciate an Andromeda character a little bit. The main issue is actually one of AAA greed and the pursuit of efficiency over artisanship. All of the speaking animations across the characters of Mass Effect Andromeda are handled via an algorithm. I understand that AI technology is powerful and can help save costs allegedly, especially in the face of ballooning AAA title budgets, but it's gross. It's obvious, and its implementation removes the relative personhood of these digital husks entirely. It's the saddest thing. This is what I meant when I pithily said in the Borderlands video that games are made and then exist. You can't rip up the floorboards here. You can't undo this. It's integral, the closest thing to a fundamental and genuine flaw in a video game I've encountered in a while. This looks bad. This works against the humanity the game strives for. It was the wrong call. But animating everything by hand would have pushed the development time long past projections, and so Andromeda was doomed by default. They tried tweaking the thing after launch, things worked better than how they initially did, but the tech was never perfect, and thus could never be perfected. Get this shit off my screen, yuck, we truly hate to see it. Andromeda's combat is such a hard departure, it's jarring, jettisoning all that old shit right out the airlock and re-establishing core principles. Movement is free and open, limited only by the player's ability to navigate the recovery frames after dashes and the relatively Mass Effect 1 cover options. Sure, you can play it like a cover shooter, but rapid flight, even teleporting, is just too strong of an option to ignore. This is also why it's important to have a basic grasp of video game mechanics when you commentate video games. You can read Mass Effect as a straight-up text, interrogating only the story, the characters, and the goals therein. But play is almost universally inherent to the medium. It's so often the flavor, the spice, it's impossible to ignore. You can't talk about how the Mass Effect trilogy is effectively a space cop game without simultaneously pointing out that the game is very often about using your superior training and combat abilities to suppress those who oppose you. Combat is inherently narratively driven. Andromeda's combat is hopeful, physically bursting with potential. It's messy, sloppy, chaotic, and narratively perfect for this kind of story. Yeah, you can zip around the battlefield, but at some point you're gonna have to define your combat intentions and zero in on your enemy. Your shields aren't particularly strong, your guns are pretty weak, and all of your parameters can be increased by engaging with the world, putting time and effort into the Andromeda initiative to unlock upgrades, turning you into a more efficient Pathfinder. The narrative cohesion is beautiful. The game, for all its weirdness, mechanically conveys its narrative in a way I didn't think it could. Doesn't look great in a cutscene though. This probably sounds silly, especially if you're not a turbo nerd, but seriously, this is a game where you can overshoot your dash, end up missing cover and behind enemy lines, and while you can then take out a nearby Ket, you're suddenly forced to contend with his buddies nearby, all because you got a little too trigger happy with the options at your disposal. Combat paints such a perfect picture of the entire initiative, how everything fell apart, and in spite of everything, Ryder's gonna pick up the pieces and carry it on, no matter what goes wrong. It's awesome. Even the class system was blown wide open. You pick a profile that defines your character numerically. A soldier will have higher shields and gun damage, a vanguard will have better melee and biotics, etc. But you also unlock new profiles as you freely sync skill points among the combat, tech, and biotic trees, eventually unlocking a totally free-form profile that grants blanket buffs and again, access to whatever you want. You transcend the limitations of the old class system, basically, and entirely at your discretion. I think it's really fun to engage with. I wanted to play a Vanguard early, but picked up a flamethrower, meaning I was hurling myself into anything and burning it all down ASAP. It's incredibly chaotic and rewarding to engage with. You can die like that if you're not paying attention, and I genuinely think it's some of the best in the series. The old Mass Effects shouldn't have done this stuff, to be clear. The old slap-based rhythm of the second and third game are hard to top, but this is something entirely fresh, regardless of all the Dragon Age comparisons. I do think enemy types are a bit silly. The game still taps into older era ideas like priming enemies for tech and biotic explosions. Combos are still relevant to play, but some of these guys are just obscenely tanky for no real reason. Part of that's on me. I didn't have a really competent gun for a good long while. You're made to complete side quests, explore, do things to get points that help you round out your kit instead of the more simplistic upgrade paths of the older games, but it's hard to complain that a game mechanically asked me to play it for power. It'd be be like getting mad at Steambot Chronicles for resisting the player with a hard mechanics check to become the next arena god. Only here, it's more like the game tells you to do the goddamn job they hired you for before you let your status go to your head. It's a shame the game was ultimately discarded so quickly because most of the tale of Andromeda is relegated to side stories. You're presented with a choice early on to awaken scientists or more military personnel from their pods, and if you choose scientists, hopefully seeding the intellectual side of progress, you genuinely piss off a host of colonists who have family, friends still trapped in stasis. There's genuine drama there. These people are lonely, impossibly far from not only home, but their own galaxy. And being human means being susceptible to your emotions. It's brutal. The thing is, you never even see the scene if you avoid going back to your first established colony. You can outright duck that content. I think Andromeda does well at communicating the drama, the heartfelt micro of lives lived in Mass Effect's universe. Sometimes it's trite and sometimes it's bland, and frankly that describes plenty of the older games, so it's hard to get upset. Mechanically though, the experience is strained. So much of the overworld and side quest stuff, main story business, is related to scanning. You know, Metroid Prime is very loved. Fun trick about Metroid Prime, you don't have to scan very much at all to actually beat the games. Andromeda makes it a feature. Tap into your AI pal to solve everything for you. Just hit the button and drop a fat scan on that suspicious object. It isn't gameplay. In one sense, it's kind of like engaging with the codex in real time, but when you're forced to cool your jets and listen time after time, scanning becomes a stumbling block, a weight that inhibits flow, in a game already fighting for a consistent flow, owing to its open world design. Mass Effect was always cropped, even the first game, and Andromeda can be daunting to get through, despite its short, minimal runtime. Not every section is open world though. You still fight in battlefields reminiscent of ME3, just with a greater sense of verticality to account for Ryder's jump, and you'll still plod through protracted underground ruin segments with a focus on platforming and switch tripping interspersed with combat. You do all of this spelunking and robot trashing in service to the main plot, so let's finally have a look. The discovery your father died for was a remnant terminal that seemingly controlled weather on the planet you crashed on, something that only Sam, your AI, could actually interface with. It's very Mass Effect in that you, the one person who can do the thing, goes about trying to solve every problem, except in this case, you're quite literally the only qualified person available. All of the initiative's scoped out planets are inhospitable. The initiative is on low resources, civil unrest is rampant, and hope is scarce. The plan didn't survive contact with reality, but it's all good. Your friends are here to carry you along. The first planet you visit suffers from general instability that a remnant terminal will fix. Too much radiation, balance it out with a terminal. Suddenly you've got your first outpost. The plot moves on from terraforming to the Angara and the Ket. Of all Andromeda's blunders, the Ket are the most interesting. It is so incredibly insane to move away from the Mass Effect trilogy, from Shepard, the hallways, the basic combat framework, from the galaxy, trying to weave a tale of the surprising, wondrous things just waiting out there in the great beyond, only to redo a weird synthesis of the Collectors and Reapers in one go. The Ket are immediately hostile, which is cool. I like when humans aren't taken for granted as saviors or immediately trustworthy otherwise, an idea the Angara crystallized for the player very quickly. The Ket help move the plot along because frankly, humans are colonizers in this story, and the Ket are just worse, more ill-intentioned colonizers, the bad guys, no questions asked. Their entire purpose is to capture and then convert living people into more Ket through a process called exaltation, which, if you've been paying attention, is more or less identical to the Collector's thieving people, containing them, melting them down into goopy biomaterial, and molding that into twisted, Reaperized versions of those stolen people. The Ket are a embarrassment creatively. Like, from a writer's perspective, they actively work against the game's own mission statement, its raison d'etre, seeing what else lies beyond the Milky Way, either for the purpose of brand familiarity or for presenting a humanoid race that's just humans but worse. They're successful on that front, okay? They're everything people know is bad about colonialism. They move in, destroy, and assimilate. They are bad. And the Andromeda Initiative has to be sympathetic in this situation. I just feel they could have gone with something less familiar in a series already struggling to sell anything alien as meaningfully alien. I do like the religious language embedded in their terms and speech, implying that for any group like the Initiative to succeed, it can't be established on rigid dogma. Things are going to get messy, but we're gonna have to learn to live together, especially as newcomers to this galaxy. It sets the oppositional force up as unmoving, resistant, actively intolerant to change, and that's good. This is why I'm torn on the game. They work and don't work in equal measure. Like, imagine if the ridiculous, hokey version of Christopher Columbus in the deeply propagandistic American founding myth went to war with, like, Hernan Cortez. Storytelling. So the biggest and evilest Ket wants to control all the remnant terminals with an object that can remotely do so, a remote control, if you will. He ends up severing the connection between the player and Sam, and in a blink we're back thanks to sci-fi premises and the crisis is averted. It's pretty funny that Ryder, someone who should be desperate to prove themselves, really doesn't go without her AI for 5 minutes and skates on its unique hero-elevating abilities for the bulk of the game. There's a genuine argument that she earns nothing over the course of the game, that she's only good at combat because of her AI. It's horrifying. I think it wants to play off the synthesis between organic and synthetic life idea from the trilogy, but ends up making her seem like an undeserving hero. Unsurprisingly, you take down the Archon and find humanity a new home, which doesn't need any terraforming and nobody is currently accessing. No colonialism, the dogmatic shitbags are destroyed, you win. A lot of Andromeda's blandness stems from its utter unwillingness to write challenging material. The Genophage and the Quarian-Geth conflict are genuinely intractable, uncomfortable situations, breeding grounds for drama and discussion, politics. Quarians simply aren't present in Andromeda, never seen in-game. The Krogan are here, but only in small numbers, nowhere approaching the threat the Solarians made them out to be, and while that's justified in context, Andromeda skips over that old chestnut for other questions. Screw the old stuff, how about our Geth replacement, the Remnant? That's right, the collective name for the tech left by an advanced race to tend old ruins while said ancient race left the cluster forever ago. They're not sapient, meaning with their creators gone and their personhood not in question, there's nothing to ask about. They're not a real source of drama except that they get in your way. Incredible. Andromeda is limp. It doesn't ask questions. The best you get involves humanity's place in the galaxy, how humanity rolls up to Angaran turf and asks for cooperation from a species looking at them as no different than the other thornier colonists, the Ket. There's genuine conflict in that, but now we're just doing Mass Effect 1 again. Humanity proving itself to the pre-established societies of Andromeda. It's all come full circle. You know, one thing that's bugged me with the reception to the Borderlands vid is the persistent claim that things just weren't handled well writing-wise, and, you know, we can point that out 1,000 times, but all I feel it really does, especially in AAA spaces, is ensure that the devs are piss scared to take any kind of risk with their IP. If every character has to live and every fan-favorite trope needs to be routinely observed, if all of this must be held sacred, at what point does the material become stagnant slop? Repetitious, endless slop. Mass Effect was always about space, but more pointedly about people. Humans specifically. Humanity is reflected in the faces of every person you meet, every mandible, every bug eye, every filtration mask. Mass Effect is about people because people are the final frontier of any kind of average sci-fi experience, but it goes beyond a lack of imagination. The devs found ways to render that frontier as worthy of exploration, adapting to the medium and handing players the pen. Who is Garrus and what's your relationship with Liara? Does Legion exist to you? Is Rex really your friend? Mass Effect was always brilliant for allowing the player in and letting them set the stage. Can you truly be bitter over a finale you had such a hand in co-authoring? For many people, our own perspectives are our own final frontiers, all the uncertainty we can handle. Of course, Mass Effect was drawn up, strategized, and marketed as a big-budget production. EA wanted its demographic and got it. The big one. But the cost was Mass Effect's true potential. Imagine something built off the back of KOTOR, finally a big budget and totally unique Bioware property suddenly seized and made to comply with publisher sales goals, with image standards, made to ship loot crates. I refuse to believe the lead dev ever wanted microtransactions or day one DLC add-ons or any of the slimy, disgusting shit EA gets up to. I called the video what I did because, as it stands, the AAA scene is the final frontier for gaming. Possibilities funneled down into a clean corporate mold. Games designed to suck up your time and your money, not to sell you a worthy, reflective, artistic experience. Hordes of internet reactionaries ensure the frontier stays final by curtailing the possibilities outright. Don't tell a different story. Don't take a risk. Stay in the box. You can dislike whatever, but when it turns into kind of performatively cruel grandstanding, it's the same as demanding control over someone else's work, and that is pure arrogance. Mass Effect was marched out to die, a raw, synthetic existence, the second it caught an audience. Even still, humanity persists, even in the face of total annihilation, through sheer charisma, pure spirit, good bones, like finding an artifact of some long-lost civilization irreparably faded and worn in a hole. My relationship with games is changing. I can appreciate so much about Mass Effect and thoroughly enjoyed getting sucked into that universe again, but there truly are so many good games, so many incredible games that play perfect right out of the box. It's hard to feel anything profound from them anymore, and the AAA franchises we all love so much are the most guilty of this. They don't recharacterize how we experience games. They don't challenge us or teach us things. They blow on by. If sleek, clean, and playable is all AAA games can offer, then I don't care if it's the final frontier of gaming, the natural endpoint of popularity and performance and focus testing. I'll just find some other place, drifting on the rim of charted space, and stake my claim in those unknown lands.
Hey, it's KBash. Huge thanks goes out to my $4 patrons. Check them out. Beautiful. And double special thanks goes to my extra generous patrons who are Adam Welch, Air Pirate Sid, Acropolon, Alfred Coria, All the Singularities, Alpha 42, Andrew Redacted, Angel Rivera, Anthony, Arshwasser, Azrael, Azura, Aaron, Axinate, Bear Skeleton, Basement Dweller, Bosch 7, Ben M, Beguile, Big Papa Spray, Blink Against the Machine, Wargle Hargle, Blossom Dante, Bohop, Boom Dead, BH Operator, Born in Shadow, Brandon S, Brandon Hesse, British Gooch, Cow, Cajun Lady, Cakesar, Can I Cuss on Here? C-Dub, Catgirls Are Real, Caesar T, Hero Hero, Chloric Fuck, Cordit, Chris Bromo, Cody Golden, Comfy Moogle, Cookie Bug, Couch Moba, Crashgers, Crater, Crispy J, Mono 19D, CW Glassworks, Denny Pangos, Danky Steaks, Swaggy David Castillo, Dara, Dash Granny, Decode, Deadward, Dead, The Strega, Dingus Bat, Doodle Flu, Doug Prince, DJ, Professor K, Dr. Cullen PhD, The Protagonist, Elias, Elpio, Elsa, Emperor Pickle, Empty Tenshi, Excalibur Shines, Gnar, Fail Knight, Fuzillion, Forte Noir, Fupasayan, Frog Vorbis, Garen Guarantee, Gato Nero, Gigglebite, Glasses Kohai, Glyph Seeker, Nine Cat, Dobo Bobo, Goose 6112, Great, The Darkest Black, Gargory, Gucci Plant, Hatsune Miku's Crack House, Archive, Heeman, Game & Station, Hermit J, Hi, Pixie, Honey Mutt, Horn Tiger, how do you know? Huey,
I just took 7 grams of magic mushrooms and now I'm lost in the woods.
I'm supporting KBash just because I wanted to make this part of the video longer. Inferno galore. Ingenious Cloud. IOBG. I punched a sandwich. It's not bad. It's time to sue. It's not good. Ivy Ruth Langley. Jack Hydrick. Jacob. Jalopy. James. Jank Dankin. Jason Lasky. Jaden. James Vaughn. Jay Drito. JL Savarus. Jay Deus. JK Hedgehog. John Bo the Joker. Jordan Joyner. Jorzy Burden. Juicy Frost. Julian My Julian. June. Kaizetta Slow. K-Chan. K-Bash's Best K. Keegan Too Cool. Keith the Thief. Kata Snap. King Kuma. Keith. Kenite Pike. Clock. K-Noe. Cone 2020. Crated. Crazy Dark Chocolate. Ice. Kyle. Not that kind. KZ Excellent. Lady Weeb. Laundry Mom. Lego Sid. Lethal Nibbles. Linkle. Little Big Trouble. Loathsome Dung Eater. Low Fat Moger. Lucas Boyd. Blood Mac James. Lunati. Magic Meows. Mama Rollin. Manapool. Manic Pixie Space Pirate. Mara Ganger. Hercules. Marcus Rambles. Maximum Dong. Meaty Smash. Maple Puppet. Mega Boy E Nasty. Metal Gear Gaseous. Michelle Citrano. Mike DeViar. Mikusagi. Moa. Bobby Dobby. Big Titty Gok GF Queen. Monochrome Only. Monochrome Rainbow. Morgana Black. Modi. Mr. Yeety Dabface McYoinkbomb. Nyrenew. Nito Torpedo. Neon Dwarf. Nifty Rex. Not Nobel. Nuggy. Old Burgle. Old Man Cranberry. Omni Nerd Zero. Only LK. The Plant. Oscar. Paperlandy. PBK. Pandemic Cowboy. Pelagic Undulation. PK Gaming. E-Mike. Popular Hitman. Prismatic Dan. Pringle Prongle. Pringle Prongle. Probably not Grady. Project Darklight. Punch Fighter Champion. Ponosaurus Rex. Quasar McDougal. Quillworth. Raging Ataraxia. Real Beans. Reggie Rodriguez. Renteca Bond. Ringed Relay. Roy Londo. RP Gamer. Ryan Michelle. Ryan Maury Brooks. Saigon Man. Salsa. Salty Smasher. Gabrius. Scribe Slendy. Sakai no Florida. Sensual Coder. Saphirium. Sexy Bionicle GF. Josh. Nintendo. Shut up, Wesley. Silver Bear 909. Sin. God!
Sir Doodles-a-lot.
Sir Newton!
Sir Slurps-a-lot.
Skywardly!
Sleepy Wabbit.
Snart!
Small Turtle House.
Sozetta Dad!
Sock'em Bopper.
Suckdolager!
Space Lizard.
Spider Dad!
Squidgid.
Squishward!
Star Night Sky.
Storm Strider and the House of Storm!
Streffin Battles. Super Dingus.
Super Sandwich Guy!
Taya Toxin.
George Chubbington!
Terrence Swift.
The Big Bubby!
The Clown Prince of Cringe.
The Digital Dutchman!
The
good Lord has blessed me, hallelujah!
The Green Loki.
The Crispy Boy!
The
Peacemaker Pyro!
The Salt Knight.
The Nomad!
The Real McCoy.
The Toasted One!
Big Dick Mystic.
Thresh!
Rips Heart.
Tiggles McGuffin!
Tim Lobster.
Timid the Writer!
Tony Jones. The Legend.
Total Play!
Travis Edwards.
Twiddle Chungus!
Tie Guy 9001.
Type A Grapefruit!
Vid.
Vacant Plaza!
Valenris.
Venom!
Vice Pop.
Video Gore!
Vic. Joaquin, get right in my bag.
Waposa!
We are so KBash.
Weed Trash!
Waylon. Where am I? Help.
Widgie! Winter Solstice!
Win TV.
Wrenchim! Zanny Tanner!
Travius.
Your boy Flyers!
Yayro 12.
Yashichi!
Yay Kundo.
Your mom, Winky
Zachary Livesey.
Zachary V.
Zanasso.
Zane the Impure.
Zane the Pure.
Zed Slayer Gamer.
Zero Salazar.
Zenova.
Cyberbunk.
If you'd like to help support the show, unlock new long-form projects, and help me keep improving, check out my Patreon. We got lots more videos in store. Stay tuned for more. KBash out.